Good evening. Calling to order the regular meeting of Sonoma's Planning Commission, and we'll start with a roll call, please.
Youth Member Pedersen,
Present.
Commissioner Nugent,
Present.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Here.
Commissioner Willers,
Here.
Commissioner WIRICK,
Here.
Vice Chair Dambach,
Here.
Chair Barnett.
Present.
Thank you, and I would like to point out that Commissioner O'Gorman Jenkins is absent from this evening's meeting.
Thank you. And welcome to our new youth representative. It's a pleasure to have you here, and we look forward to working with you. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda, and I would hear a motion or consideration of changes to the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Roll call, please, Natalie.
Commissioner Nugent,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes.
Commissioner Willers,
Yes.
Commissioner WIRICK,
Yes.
Vice Chair Dambach,
Yes.
Chair Barnett,
Aye.
Youth Member Pedersen.
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. All right, the next order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Lynch, past alcalde, would you like to lead us in the pledge?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. As long as everybody will carry on. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, next order of business is the selection of officers. As the commission knows, I've been the chair for a couple of years, and it's time to pass it on. The comments come after the selection. So at this point, I'm going to open up the nomination for chair of the commission.
I nominate Commissioner Dambach.
Second.
Okay, we have a nomination and a second. Roll call, please, Natalie.
Public comment first, Chair.
Thank you. Ever watchful, Natalie Lundeen. Are there any comments from the public as to the matter of the selection of chair? Seeing none, we will bring it back to the commission. Now we're ready for the roll call vote.
Commissioner Nugent,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes.
Commissioner Willers,
Yes.
Commissioner WIRICK,
Yes.
Vice Chair Dambach,
Okay.
Chair Barnett,
Yes.
Youth Member Pedersen.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Okay, congratulations. And I'm going to pass the gavel to you. This is the seat of power. And you can handle the selection of vice chair.
All right. So I will call for the nomination of the vice chair.
Yes. I would nominate Matt WIRICK for vice chair.
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Public comment.
Public comment on the selection for the vice chair. Seeing none, we'll ask for a roll call.
Commissioner Nugent,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes.
Commissioner Willers,
Yes.
Commissioner WIRICK,
Okay.
Chair Dambach,
Yes.
Commissioner Barnett.
Aye.
Thank you.
You'll get used to the new order, Natalie. Don't worry.
Youth Member Pedersen.
It'll all come back
Yes.
to you.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, at this time, members of the public may comment on any item not appearing on the agenda. And the ask is that when you come up, please state and spell your name for the record.
Ken Stokes, Stokes. I'm a resident of Brazil Street. Start off by congratulating the new leadership of the commission. I'm sure you'll be better than okay. So, as I said, I live on Brazil Street. I spoke to the commission at this meeting last month. I'm back on the same subject. But first, I want to thank you for the many hours you put in on service to the community. I know that they're far beyond the imagination of what most of us out here think is required. Having served on a school board previously, you can't believe the number of hours that add up through time, because this is just a small fraction of what we see at the tip of the iceberg. My remarks are similar tonight to what I said to the city council at the same podium last night. I'm here as a member of a neighborhood group of neighbors around the Sebastiani Winery, but I speak only for myself. I don't pretend to represent the views of the group, although I think there's some commonality. When I spoke to this group last month at the same meeting, along with a number of my neighbors, I think we were initially alarmed and perhaps overreacted to the fact that we just become aware that the winery property was up for consideration in both the general plan update and for rezoning. Several of us spoke to you last month, as you recall. We made you aware primarily of our concerns and our worst fears. And with minimal understanding of the situation at that point in time, we expressed our worst fears, ranging, well, I won't even bother to recap them. We can all go back and watch the tape. Clearly, at its worst, things would be horrendous for both the city and for local neighbors. However, I think I personally was greatly encouraged by then Chairman Barnett's encouragement to myself and the group to come back, engage in the process, and be as specific going forward as we could as either individuals or a group with what we would like to see transpire on the property in terms of land use, in terms of zoning, and ultimately development. We took that to heart. We are working hard as a group to educate ourselves and come back in due course with exactly that, and we're well aware of the scheduled meetings, but we're learning more daily. In fact, I myself and a colleague in the group had an excellent meeting with Jennifer Gates earlier this week, and every step along the way, we increase our knowledge base tremendously. We are trying to separate fact from fiction. We're trying to understand the process, the roles of the various participants, the timeline, and we're doing exactly what we were encouraged to do by then Chairman Barnett, which is working toward providing as specific input as we possibly can. Whether it matches how you ultimately translate that into quantified rules and regulations will remain to be seen, because I don't think we'll ever have the expertise of the professional staff and the Planning Commission. But you'll be seeing myself and or others regularly at this and city council meetings. My guess is for the next 12 plus months, all the way through the update of the general plan, ultimately the adoption of new zoning, and presumably eventually adoption of a specific plan of development for the piece of property. So again, I thank you. I thank Mr. Barnett for his encouragement to remain involved. We will take that to heart, and you'll be hearing from us. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the audience? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the consent calendar, which is receiving the minutes from the regular Planning Commission meeting on December 19th, 2024. I would ask if there are any changes or edits to those minutes. Seeing none, I would ask for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
All right, so we need a roll call now.
Commissioner Nugent,
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes, with just one name misspelling. Can I just give it to you, Natalie? And-
Yeah.
Okay, Art Grandy, it ends in Y. Thank you.
okay. Commissioner Willers,
Yes.
Vice Chair WIRICK,
Yes.
and Chair Dombach.
Yes.
Youth Member Pedersen.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
On to the public hearing, item 5.1, which is a discussion, consideration, and possible action to approve the application for Design Review and Variance to allow for modifications to existing exterior lighting that exceeds the allowed foot candles located at 35 West Napa Street, including an action to approve the CEQA categorical exemption of the state CEQA guidelines.
All right, thank you, new Chair DAMBACH. I'm going to practice. And fellow commissioners. So tonight before you, as stated, is going to be a design review and variance for an item that we have heard previously. So this is at the Bank of America parking lot at 35 West Napa. Commercial use, as we all know, in our historic overlay and our downtown plaza retail overlay district. So here is a view of the project site that many of us see on a daily basis. And the proposed project was brought before the Planning Commission on September 17th. And Planning Commission had some concerns related to the lighting intensity as well as the spillage. And the applicants did listen to that. They have resubmitted the plans for consideration tonight, and they have also, I'm hoping they're in the room. Thank you. They have sent their lighting specialist, I think from Texas. Yep. To come talk to us and help us understand the layout a little bit more and what they're proposing. So the revised lighting proposal includes 7 wall-mounted fixtures, 6 pole-mounted, and 8 pendant canopies mounted fixtures that are going to be replaced. That's 3 less replacement lights than previously presented. 2 wall-mounted fixtures and 2 new canopy-mounted fixtures, which is 1 less than previously presented. And then we are removing now 2 wall-mounted, 2 canopy-mounted, and 4 floodlights, and that's 3 additional lights being removed than previously provided. As previously stated, all new fixtures will be 3,000 Kelvin and maintain the internal screening to direct light and limit the spillage beyond the project's boundary. The applicant has provided the revised photometric plan identifying the foot candles and the light spread for the site. And as described in the development code, has specific maximum foot candles measured at grade for security and parking lot pole lights. Since the last meeting, lights have been removed, as we've just previously discussed, and there is a reduction in the foot candles as seen on the screen. The maximum foot candle measurement has been reduced from 19.9 foot candles to 16.3, which is located around that front ATM area. I did want to point it out in case you had trouble finding it. But this does still exceed our development code, and a variance is still required. There also has been reduction in the lighting around the ATM specifically. And just as a reminder that there is a state law around lighting for ATM machines during quote-unquote hours of darkness, and provides that specific foot candle requirements. The proposed project does exceed the state's minimum requirements of 10 foot candles at the face of the ATM, 2 foot candles within 50 feet, and 2 foot candles within 60 feet of the ATM in the parking lot. The ATM machine is located under a canopy, which does contain some of that light within that area and lessening that light spillage. Since the last meeting, the lights have been removed from this area, and there is a reduction in the foot candles measured at 36 inches above grade, and then 50 feet from the ATM as seen in this visual. I know the numbers are really small. The maximum foot candle measurement has been reduced from 42.3 foot candles to 34 foot candles, which is located just directly in front of that ATM machine. And again, this still exceeds our development code, and a variance is still required. Here again are the proposed lights. And this was all part of your package. And again, as we have discussed, it does not comply with our foot candle requirements. And design review, it does comply. There is no change in color or materials. So, as last time, if the Planning Commission does determine that the findings can be met for a variance for the lighting, then staff recommends approving the application for design review and variance, including the action to approve the categorical exemption. And as stated, the applicant does have lighting specialist here to present as well. But staff is available to answer any questions at this time.
Can you just familiarize me with the justification or reasons for these changes, was it primarily a matter of security as pertaining to the ATM? Or were there other conditions that prompted all this?
The main reason around was the ATM compliance. So there is a document that was provided that's not meeting the requirements within the 50-foot mark. They're going to have to explain that document. It was provided in your packet. I also believe that what we're seeing with a lot of different lights that are older is that we are going to be getting more requests to upgrade to the new LED energy efficiency lights as we move forward. That's part of the reason why we are looking to make sure when we do our new lighting standards, really looking at what that means and making sure that we're maintaining that 3,000 Kelvin so that we don't have a white light situation which we typically have at 5,000, and trying to maintain some of that night sky, which I know is our goal.
Well, I have noted that LEDs in general, to me, have a greater degree of brightness than the previous kind of illumination.
The incandescent.
And in general, I mean, even headlights are becoming problematic. So it raises the question, and it's not something we'll take up at this meeting, but to what extent is our development code and its conditions out of sync with the trend and specifications of the technology? In other words, are we going to run into these same problems over and over and over again?
I think based on the two that we've had so far, that is a big possibility that we are going to run into this foot candle measurement that's at the base of a parking lot light. Remember how we were talking about that when you have, Commissioner Willers did a really great job of explaining with the flashlight, the higher up and then the closer down in the spread. And so the idea that we would have multiple light poles now to kind of help that blend versus having just the few that we have. So right now we're asking for just replacements and not adding more light fixtures. And so I think in some of those cases, that's when we're hitting more intensity at the base to help get the spread. But I think that's why we added it to our list of things to do as well, is to help with our night sky and our change in lighting types. But I am not a professional in this, which is why I'm glad they send people that do this on a daily basis.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? All right, I'll open this up for public comment. Any comments on this item?
So we do have the applicant.
Oh, okay.
So the applicant can do a presentation and present their project too. And
That sounds great. Again, if you'll just remember to state your name and spell it.
Spell it? Okay. My name is David Bruce, B-R-U-C-E. I work for GMR, which is the design firm hired by Bank of America to create the lighting design. I think she pretty well laid out the extent of what we're trying to do. So there's a program called the ELP program for Bank of America, which is the exterior lighting program. First and foremost, it's to upgrade all the lighting to meet any state financial codes requiring lighting around ATMs. So that's for safety and security of anyone using ATMs at night. And then the second part is to upgrade to LED for energy efficiency. So this particular site came in, so my company goes out and we do nighttime surveys of all Bank of America locations every year. So this one was surveyed and did not meet the requirements. And I believe you do have that document. Can you throw it up there? Sorry, I put you on the spot.
Perhaps while she's looking, can you just let the commission know, with regard to my question about a change in the lighting technology and its conformance with existing standards in various communities, are you observing in the towns and locations and jurisdictions in which you're engaged in this activity of changing out the lighting, that you're running into the same issue of compliance with existing codes in terms of lumens or candle?
Yeah, I think the biggest comment I would have is there's been a lot of lighting ordinances that have been passed that don't factor in existing locations. So it's easy to make something compliant with an ordinance when you're starting new. You can put lights wherever you want. You can redesign a parking lot, poles, all of that. When you're dealing with existing, you have trees limiting where you can put poles, parking spaces. The building itself, there's only so many options where you can run conduit. So you run into limitations as what is actually realistic when you are going back to an existing structure that already has lighting installed in it. That's the biggest issue I'm running into.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so this is the nighttime survey we did. So anything that has the 2 asterisks or stars next to it is a failed reading, meaning it's not meeting the state financial code requirements. And this also kind of does help point out a little bit too, because I know we've talked somewhat about what the ordinance is and for the max light levels. And you can see the existing lighting, especially under the canopies, is already exceeding it currently, just because of the placement of the lighting. And so we're kind of, based on the comments we got last time, we are actually going to go in and we're going to remove some of the existing lightings, patch that, and try and then spread them out a little bit more so that you're not getting so much intensity in one spot. It's still going to be over, like I think she was pointing out, I think you said it was 10 was the, or what was your max? I'm sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head. Sorry.
So it's 10-foot candles at the face of an ATM, 2-foot candles within 50 feet.
Well, but what's your ordinance for the
our
variance?
ordinance is 5.
Is 5, okay.
Yeah.
So even at the front of the ATM where we need 10, you can't get exactly 10. You're gonna have to, just based on where you can put fixtures, you're gonna have to exceed that somewhat, based again because it's an existing location. So.
Sorry, to clarify, 5-foot candles at the base of a light pole. For security lighting, we have a maximum of 3-foot candles at ground.
Okay. So again, I just think this survey, A, it shows it's not meeting the state requirements, and then B, it's also kind of giving you an idea of what the existing lighting is currently doing. And I think we're going to be able to alleviate some of the bright spots that we're already showing on this existing survey. If we can help spread out, we'll remove some of the fixtures because, right, especially in the entrance, there was just a high concentration of these canopy fixtures where now we're going to go in, we're going to remove some and then add a new one. We're going to kind of spread it out a little bit. So that was kind of one of the main things I wanted to point out, and then I'm also available for any other questions y'all have regarding the plans.
I have a question. Are we putting ourselves at risk by not meeting the state standard? Or exceeding? Oh, I thought we weren't meeting an asterisk.
The site is not in compliance with the state financial code. I don't fully, that becomes a legal issue as far as, I don't think anyone from the state is going to enforce anything, but it becomes more of a liability issue, lawsuit issue, as far as this is what the standard was, you weren't meeting it. So, I mean, again, the standard really is created because you would not believe how many ATMs and there's just no lighting around them. And it is a huge problem. And we've done this for a long time, and there are instances every single year of people being robbed and hurt. And this isn't going to stop any of that, but it may help somebody see something before it happens. So.
Any commissioner questions for the applicant?
So my primary question is, you've got adequate lighting now, you've revised the lighting around the ATMs to meet the state requirement. But then as you move down the building, you're still meeting the ATM requirements in terms of the foot candles on the ground. And you're exceeding our ordinance essentially by a level of almost threefold.
Is
Why
that-
are we continuing to do that as we move down the building?
I guess if we can go back to the page, just kind of doing the overall site plan. Because as we're going down, especially under a canopy, I mean, very much any canopy fixture or wall light that's right underneath the canopy at that height, I don't know of anyone that you're going to get 3 or 5 foot candles, especially right directly underneath the light source.
No, I understand that, but you know, our ordinance is calling for 3 once we move beyond in terms of parking lighting.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're lighting. You're lighting the parking lot once you move away from the ATM. The foot candles in the center of the parking lot, because of the arrangement of the lights, still is exceeding the number of foot candles by a factor of 2. Are there, I guess my question is are there other fixtures that we can choose that would bring that closer to the compliance of our preferred level of lighting in the city, rather than having illumination at the edges of this property threefold what we're asking for? And I understand that we have limited number of fixtures to spread the light from, but when you look at the photometric, you know, in the middle of the drive aisle, we've got levels that are basically on average of about 6 to 7.
So a problem with that is all of the lights impact that compliance area. So it would be easier, again, if you're starting new, you can design a parking lot in a way where I don't have to rely on this pole that is 15 to 20 feet away. So that's kind of the issue you run into when you're trying to meet something like this on an existing location, is all of these fixtures are helping us hit that 2 foot candle minimum. But when you combine all of them, you're going to get higher numbers. It's just you're limited by location
I
more than
understand
anything.
But that is a 50-foot radius, so if I'm looking at the photometric, it's basically the dimension that is maybe to the pole that's on the east side of the parking lot, in the parking lot in that area. But the remainder of the lighting along the wall isn't leading to add to those foot candles in that 50-foot radius. It's simply, in relative to our code, it's over illuminating the parking lot.
So I guess if we're talking about like the UTW fixture at the end there, the blue one, is that? So yeah, even that one would be affecting the 60-foot parking readings, which would also be under that requirement. So again, I think more or less what you're looking for is you want a fixture that is less powerful.
What we're looking for is we want lower light levels throughout the city while being secure
Right.
and serving the purposes of the state, but generally keeping the ambient light in our community low.
I mean, I do understand that. I think from the bank's perspective, these are the fixtures that we work with because they work very well. They last a long time. And you run into an issue where this UTW fixture, if I'm going to put a smaller one there, it can affect the 50-foot reading, where you can see right above there's a 3 and a 3.2 in that 50-foot radius. Like, that will be affected by that fixture.
But that's not adjacent to ATMs.
That's the UTW one. If you
Well, where you're getting
Right there, yeah.
where you're getting the 3-foot candles is is well outside of the 50-foot radius of the ATMs.
the 3 that I'm showing is inside the compliance area right there, 3.2. So by adjusting this light, you're now lowering what it is inside the
I got it.
compliance area. So just because it's not a fixture that's actually inside the compliance area, it still is having impact
No, I
on it.
understand.
And I think, I mean, some of this too, the canopy fixtures we're using are very low lumen, especially for LED fixtures. I don't know, I'm sure you can find some fixture that is lower, but this is very low for a canopy fixture already. And typically what you're gonna see is a bright spot, 1 or 2 readings right below where it is, and it just quickly tapers off. You're really just lighting underneath that canopy. It's not meant to throw light out. It's shooting directly down. That will be bright. That's going to give you a 10 or an 11, and then you're going to see it drop off dramatically within feet as soon as you get away from the canopy, and that is very standard.
So
Commissioner
those are the
Barnett?
only questions, because I think the remainder of the photometrics are basically within our standard.
Thank you.
So just to be clear, what we're defining as a compliance area, we're talking about compliance with state standards?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions from the commission? Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Now, any comments from the public on this item? Nobody wants to talk about foot candles? Seeing no one taking the offer, I will close out the public comment. All right. Any discussion or commentary by the commissioners?
I have a comment. I'm just going to put it on record that this is not the highest and best use of this property. And I want to put it out there to Bank of America that this is an eyesore in our community. And it's nothing to do with your lighting. It's just this is a really obsolete property, an obsolete branch, and it doesn't serve our community. And I just think it needs to be noted to Bank of America that they ought to do a whole lot better if they want to stay here on our plaza.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Sure, I'll jump in. I'll say that it's a prerogative of our community here to have a dark sky. While we don't have the designation, maybe we've talked about working towards that. It's important to us. That said, I understand the factors in mitigation here that include safety. Being in the public safety industry, I understand how very real lighting factors into several things, being able to identify faces on recorded surveillance footage, etc. I also appreciate Bank of America's scrutiny and their revision and coming back to the table and making an attempt to get closer to the parameters that we would like to see that we articulated during the previous hearing on this issue. I can make the findings personally to approve this variance, and I would be supportive of doing that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Commissioner Barnett?
Well, let me just say that the great irony of all of this is that we're talking about the illumination of an empty parking lot. And so from the standpoint of the property owner and the bank, obviously whether it's in use to a high degree or a low degree is secondary to what the risk is and the risk assessment that they have to determine in terms of their liability as an owner. But it is ironic that we're going to improve all this lighting in a space that basically is unused for the period of time that the illumination is on. I think that there's no question but that we need to be in compliance with state law. So those issues, I think, are clear. And the degree to which there's some variance in that 50-foot perimeter with our existing code merely prompts to me the idea once again that we may have to examine in terms of the light of reality the specific nature of our code going forward, given the change in lighting and state standards. And as much as we want to preserve a less illuminated city, it may be that some of the standards we have in place are not going to be very workable. So we might as well be real about what it is that we're enacting. But all that said, I would approve the variance.
Anyone else? Okay, and I'll just end by saying I agree with these comments that, you know, it's a balance between our desire to keep a night sky, but also the need to protect people. And the area that's being highly illuminated is an area that may be used for 24 hours. People may come to the ATM in the middle of the night, and so I think that we just need to ensure that there's public safety around that. I also appreciate that the applicant came and worked with us to try to mitigate some of the intensity of the light. All right, well, I will open it up for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the variance that allows for modifications to the existing exterior lighting that exceeds the foot candles allowed under our development code.
I'll second.
All right, roll call.
Commissioner Barnett,
Aye.
Commissioner Nugent,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes.
Commissioner Willers,
Yes.
Vice Chair WIRICK,
Yes.
Chair DAMBACH,
Yes.
Member Pedersen.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
One last question for the applicant. Are they putting you up somewhere nice?
Embassy Suites.
That's
Where's
not in
that?
Sonoma.
San Rafael. We had to fly in from San Francisco.
I see. You didn't fly into Sonoma, huh?
No.
Before we move on to the next two items, I have a procedural question. The next two items are side-by-side properties, and the same variance is requested. So is it possible for us to combine the comments and combine the discussion?
Right. So, yeah, although the comments are addressing both of the projects, they are separate parcels and we have to treat them as such.
Okay, thank you.
And just for clarity, one has just a variance and the other one has a variance and an exception. So, and they are different properties. Yeah, they're different looking too.
Kind of mirror images.
Not the design, I meant the lots.
All right. All right, well, we'll move on to item 5.2, which is discussion, consideration, and possible action to approve a variance reducing the garage setback requirement for a new single-family dwelling to be constructed at 67 Oak Lane.
Madam Chairperson, if I may, I'd like to raise a jurisdictional issue. It's not a substantive issue.
Excuse me, may I ask your name?
Yes,
And,
I'm sorry. My name is Richard Price, spelled P-R-E-I-S-S.
and is this a public comment
No,
associated
it's
with
not.
this?
It's not a public comment. I'm raising a jurisdictional issue. I don't believe that adequate notice has been provided for this meeting, and that this meeting should not go forward. And I have a basis which I'd like to present. And the commission should be aware that if the notice has not been provided adequately, and this does go forward, and it is appealed, and we have a group of neighbors that are in opposition to this particular, to both applications, if that appeal is successful, not only is the commission's decision overturned, but the entire record is expunged, and the applicant will have to renotice and will have to start again. So if the notice is deficient, it's an enormous waste of your time, the applicant's time, and our time. I'd like to put on the record why I believe the notice is deficient. It's not a substantive comment on the application.
If I may, it was mentioned in the comment, and we did plan on addressing that at the end of the presentation. I don't know if it's more appropriate to address it now.
Excuse me.
I'll leave it to the chair
Yeah.
to decide if you
If-
want us to address the question.
I do,
if-
because
Madam Chair.
I want to understand, if, what the issue was,
Yeah.
and whether Mr. Price's comments are to be considered.
Could
Okay,
I just, I hate to interrupt, but since that period of time, there's other factors that have come into consideration. I'd like to present an additional factor why the notice is deficient. If you could just allow me to put that on the record, and then the commission can decide.
Go ahead.
Okay. So the first thing is the notice that is provided to the neighbors does not adequately provide a context and an indication for relief. I'll just read what's in the notice. It says, public hearing to consider a variance to allow for the construction of a garage less than 20 feet from the front of the proposed primary structure. So the application does not mention the fact that the primary structure is a single-family home. It fails to mention the zone in which it's located. It fails to mention, it does not give a citation in the code of what portion of the code is being mentioned. It does not state what the setback is. It just says what the difference is. It does not mention what the requirement is. It does not state what the setback is proposed, and it also fails to mention the exception in the front yard. So there's not an adequate description, and we getting the notice have no idea what the relief is that's being sought. Second of all, the notice is required to be posted at least 10 days ahead of the meeting in 3 locations, including in front of the property. This was not done. I checked 10 days ahead of time, and I checked 7 days ahead of time prior to tonight's meeting. It was not posted. I came back from vacation 2 days ago. It was posted. It's on a piece of paper that is completely torn. It's faded, and it's not legible. So the simple fact that it wasn't posted 10 days ahead of time makes the notice deficient. The other thing is that under the requirements of the law, is plans are supposed to be made available for the public review 10 days prior to the meeting. I went to City Hall 10 days ago. They were not posted online. I asked if there were paper copies for me to view. They were not available, and it wasn't online. Nothing was made available until Friday. It was posted online. That's 7 days ahead of the hearing. That's not adequate. We have scrambled as the neighbors because notice was the plans weren't available online to formulate an opinion and to be here this evening. But the fact that the plans were not available at City Hall for me to review 10 days ahead of time, in my opinion, makes the notice insufficient. So as such, I don't believe that the meeting should go forward. I believe that the applicant should renotice that under those circumstances, once that happens, they're entitled to make their presentation. We will come back because we have substantive comments on the application, and then the board can be sure that its decision will be judged on the basis of the substantive and not on procedural grounds. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So a couple of questions for you all regarding the Mr. Price's comments, and with regard to our compliance and the risk of moving forward. That's one question. And the other question is around if it's true that these things weren't done on certain dates, the comments against the project were still able to be submitted, and so I don't know if that is taken into consideration. So it sounds like that the comments that the neighbors were able to review and make comments in time. So I don't know, how do we consider that?
Okay, I have a number of, I'll try to address everything, but if there's something I forget, let me know. So the city does follow the California code pursuant to California for noticing. I'm going to move down because I'd actually made notes on it. So the mailed notices must be sent no less than 10 days prior to the hearing date. Which means that we would have had to send them out by mail on the 6th, and they were mailed out on the 2nd. So they were actually mailed out 4 days early. And there's also a requirement to post them in a published newspaper, so they're published in the local newspaper sooner than the requirement. The first was on the 3rd and the second was on the 10th. So we actually ran it in 2 of the issues. And when I do recall this gentleman coming in, it was early last week, and he came in with the notice in hand. And he was asking about it. He seemed more concerned about design aspects and expressed his frustration in that sense. And I explained to him that new builds are not subject to design review, that it's actually just those specific elements that are going in front of you this evening. And then additionally, we don't have paper plans because now, you know, times have changed and we accept things electronically. We don't require the 3 sets because we distribute them electronically. But I did take my personal work computer over to the counter and we went over the plans together. He did want to take pictures of them, and I did not allow him to do that because we're legally not allowed to distribute stamped architectural plans. Furthermore, for the posting on the site, we did post on the site, and Natalie did rather, and I went to complete a site visit on January 7th, and I actually took a picture of it, so it was up.
The notice was posted on the 3rd.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm hearing is that based on postmarks, based on information that with regard to site application, that we were in compliance. So one question about the electronic access is the 10-day requirement. Did we meet that?
So we're required to publicize the agenda. It's
72 hours.
72 hours before. So that's when you guys see the same time that you guys see the staff report and all the supporting material. However, you're more than welcome to come in and I showed him the plans, and we absolutely encourage folks to do that. I encouraged him to make a public comment and submit a public comment and be here tonight if he wished to do so. Additionally, there was a comment made about, just tonight, about not a good enough description of the zoning, and I think that is up on the screen now, and you can see that the location, the case number, the zoning, the overlay, the APN, and the California code, you have to provide a general description. It's not going to be, that's not where you would do a long description. And then you provide all the contact information if someone is concerned to give you a call, and puts the lead planning person.
And so what I'm hearing from your description, from what's on the screen, is that the written notice complies with what's required by the state?
Correct.
And so based upon your expertise in working in this area, have we complied with the requirements of notice?
Yes.
Could I address what was just indicated?
It's unusual, but I'll let you address it so we can get past this.
So in terms of the availability of the plans, I asked for either a paper copy or electronic copy. Neither was provided. The computer was brought over and set before me in front of the counter. There was no way that I could see any of the plans. I was not able to compare the 2 sets of plans, which is something I wanted to do. I asked if I could make a copy so that I could take it home and review it, and I was told that was not possible. So in terms of making it available 10 days ahead of time, that absolutely did not happen. What transpired was not what I consider an adequate means of my being able to review the application. When you talk about reviewing the application, either you provide paper plans, or you provide a computer station where somebody can sit, or you post them online. Moreover, in terms of the public comment, the city's practice is to include public comment on the Thursday before the meeting, right? The plans were, said so.
No, that is not correct. It's up to the day of the meeting.
I know that, but in order for it to be posted and provided online so others can see it, it's the Thursday before the meeting. And Late on Friday, I checked and the plans were only available then. So there's no way that I could make any kind of public comment that would be included in the package that you received. And I went to the site several times, 10 days ahead of time, 7 days ahead of time. It may have been posted on that time, but it certainly wasn't present. And my neighbors are all here, and we've all talked about it, and I will bring them up one by one, and they can tell you whether any notice was available from that time forward. I don't know if it blew away, but it's the applicant's obligation to provide the notice so that anybody passing by that property sees the notice and what the variance is, and that was just not possible. Flimsy paper stamp pinned to a telephone pole that blew away is not adequate notice. And so you may go forward with this hearing tonight. And you risk that and we will challenge this, and you risk that if it is challenged, that this entire record will be expunged, that your decision will be overturned. That's just going to waste the applicant's time. We're prepared to make a comment, although we had to scramble to do it because the plans weren't available in time. But we're prepared to move forward. But I'd like to put on the record that we do not agree with staff in terms of the notice, and we don't think it was adequately provided. And in terms of the description, I stand by my record. There's no way that anybody reading the notice could understand what
Yes, thank you. Again, I will just, before we make a decision, I'll just go back and address the staff.
If I could address the plans being available. So part of my job in the department is that any plans that are stamped by an architect, whether they've been made public on an agenda or are part of a plan set for a building permit, if they are stamped, there's a process to gain access to those, to be given a copy of them. We have to request that the plans be given by the architect or the engineer that has stamped the plans. They have 30 days to respond. After that 30 days, if there is no response, we can then hand out the plans. So even if it was on the agenda or anything, we still couldn't give out printed copies of them at this time.
The other question I have with regard, I mean, I do know it's city practice that at least the Friday before the meeting, that the full packet material is made public on our website. With regard, again, to the 10 days before, just a question of clarification. First of all, the plans were made available. It was at a computer, and probably I'm guessing, and I'll ask staff if the person requested to look at the plans, and did they comment that they could not see the plans or make any judgment on the plan? So that's a question for you. And then again, the second question is again regarding this 10-day period.
Yes, so there was no comment made about not being able to see the plans, and he actually was commenting on how he had recommended all of these architectural and materialistic changes to the applicant that he wanted to see in the design of the home, which, as we've discussed, is not part of under discussion tonight. And he didn't see those changes made. Then he looked at the second set of plans and said, oh, okay, they made one change. So that would indicate to me that he had the ability to discern one thing from another on the plans.
All right. Again, I'll ask this question with regard to the required noticing and the required availability. Does the staff feel that they are in compliance?
Yes.
Do you feel there's any risk of moving forward?
No. Like any other case, on appeal, it would go in the same instances. So I don't think there is. I'm, running back through the information. It doesn't say that it has to be paper, and it doesn't say that it has to be given. And we do make it available. Went through our code just now to, we actually do a little bit more than what's required in our noticing and what the content is. I don't know if you remember what it used to look like, but we have added a lot more. But the, we have discussed how to access plans. We've discussed more about comments that come in after. As soon as we receive comments from the public, they immediately go online and are made available on our document center, and they were immediately sent to you as well, so that you are seeing all comments as we see them. And the intent is also to give those to the applicant as well at the same time. We have met the minimum requirements. We actually at the city exceed the state requirements, and we did meet all of those requirements as well.
Well, I appreciate, you know, the comments of you coming up, but based upon what I'm hearing, I would say we'll proceed with these two items. Again, thank you. And so the first thing we'll do now is have the staff presentation.
Okay, we're getting back there. Okay, well, good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, and Commissioners. So as we all know now, the first item before you is we're going to first address 670 Oak Lane, and that is the southern lot of the two undeveloped lots. Here's an image, and again, you'll see 670 on the southern end. It's a 6,400 square foot lot. It's within the Central East Planning Area. It's one of two undeveloped lots within the otherwise developed subdivision of Vintage Estates, and it has a zoning of low density residential. So the variance request is for an 8-foot garage setback from the front of the house, and the code requires a 20-foot setback. Again, the home itself is not subject to approval by the board. It's just the variance that's before the commission. Let's see. And these elevations, I just put these to sort of demonstrate the projection of the front side of the house, as well as the eave off of the front of the house and the covered porch. As detailed in the staff report, the development code that the garage shall be located 20 feet from the front of the primary structure. The garage is set back 8 feet from the front wall, and it's also 11 feet 4 inches from the front of the porch, which, including the eave as well, is actually 12 feet 8.5 inches. I didn't include this detail in the staff report because it was actually when I was going through this, I was looking at the definition of a primary structure and how that means a structure that accommodates the primary use of the site. So you could interpret it as the front wall of the home or an architectural feature coming off of the primary use of the home. I think it's good that we used the most modest distance just to play it safe. The project is compliant with the previously approved Vintage Estates subdivision map, which indicates that garages need to be set back a minimum of 20 feet from the sidewalk. And this is met, and it's actually exceeded. So you can see here that the other homes were all built with slight variations in front setback, as indicated on the subdivision map, and the garages were not set back from the.
Excuse me, could you please be quiet? Thank you.
So sorry, that threw me off a little bit. So these measurements up on the screen, although they don't show an indication of length, I just wanted it visible to you and people of the public that I actually is just showing the length of the lot, and it shows the difference between the lots, not only in their total square footage, but in the lot length. So for instance, the lot that we're talking about right now is just under 105 feet long on the north property line. and there are other, the other lots are much longer than that, some of them up to 45 feet longer. And these are just images of a few of the other homes on the street. All the homes on the street are similar to this, and the proposed garage location would be in line with the general character of the rest of the subdivision and the homes across the street. These weren't selective, these were just the ones that were closest to the subject property, other than the corner lot, which had been a lot that was merged but still maintains the same type of characteristics. So here are the findings that are required to be met in order to grant the variance. In summary of the findings within the resolution, the garage setback would not pose any inconsistencies with the general plan or any other plan. The lot's smaller size and shorter length compared to other homes does limit the owner's ability to utilize the lot in a fashion that other homes can, particularly in regard to FAR and rear yard space. If they were required to do a 40-foot, well, it's essentially a 40-foot setback when you have a minimum, it's a 45-foot setback with a 25-foot front yard setback and then a 20-foot setback from there to the beginning of the garage. And so it just gets bumped back further into the lot. And when you have a lot that's only 100 feet deep, that can be very difficult. Granting the variance would not create a special privilege to this property that cannot be enjoyed by other properties, as this project is in compliance with the subdivision map that all the other properties were developed under. And there is no impact to public health, safety, or welfare as a result of the project. So we are stating that if the commission determines the findings can be met, we are recommending approval. And we can discuss any of the other concerns in the public comment too, here or in the next project, whichever is most suitable.
Thank you. Do the commissioners have any questions for the staff? And I don't know if the applicant is here, if they might want to.
We do.
Again, if you'll state your name, please.
My name is Robert Bauman. And just to be clear, I am not the designer of the project. I'm just a local architect helping the property owners get through the approvals process here in Sonoma. So that being said, I agree with everything staff has said. If possible, could you put the site plan that shows both properties up again? Yeah. I just wanted to point out just continue what staff was explaining. These are the two smallest lots in the entire neighborhood. With that comes a challenge architecturally to make a layout for a home, a floor plan layout for a home work while complying with a 20-foot setback to a garage. You would need to put the garage so far back that it would make a layout for living space null and void. It's a challenge that you may not understand unless you're dealing with floor plans all the time. So I think it's absolutely supportable to say that the garage setbacks should have this variance. It's the setbacks that are the garage setback from the face of the house is what the variance is about. I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. Moving on from the setbacks and staff's report, I want to make a few comments about the neighbor opposition. The property owners met with all the neighbors, not all of them, but a good number of the neighbors, back on November 9th, and got signatures of support for the project. I don't know if you have seen these, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 different groups approved what they saw. And then, as of this morning, Mr. Price, who previously spoke, was able to gather support to be against the project, and I think that their reasoning is unfounded. There is a letter that they submitted, I believe it was this morning, about the location of the garage and what that would mean to parking in front of the garage. And I wanted to point out that the parking spaces that would be in front of the garage are minimum size for Sonoma, 10 by 20. They would fit well away from the sidewalk. So I think that that their letter being against that is unfounded. There were some other comments that Mr. Price made to the to the property owners that I feel were just impractical regarding design, and because design is not something that we're talking about at this hearing, they should just be disregarded. So that is all I wanted to say, but I'm available for any other questions that you may have.
Commissioner Barnett?
Yes, just looking at that overhead photograph of the two lots, they look to me like their width is fairly standard. Do you have any figures on what the actual lot width is as opposed to the depth?
I believe staff could answer that. 60 feet wide?
60?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the Commissioner?
I did have one more comment, and this is sort of a follow-up on a comment, Bill, that I've heard you make before. Yes, they're the smallest lots in the neighborhood, and people can buy these lots knowing that they're buying these smaller lots. And you shouldn't be able to go back and ask for something that, oh, woe is me, I bought the smallest lot, now give me an exception. You knew it going into it. The difference here, though, is that the front setback is nebulous, vague at best, admittedly by planning staff. The question that came up and was answered by planning staff is the front yard setback from right-of-way or property line? And staff determined property line. And what they then went and designed is compliant, except for the 2.5 feet they're asking for front yard setback. Does staff also have the site plan of both applications that has, if you could put this one up, this also makes a very demonstrative point of this one? One that shows
Yes.
both, that has the setbacks. This site plan shows, yep, back one. If you see all of the setbacks, front yard setbacks, there's 20, 25, 30, they vary along that whole front. So the fact that what they're proposing complies with the original development back, in the 50s or whenever this was done, and that these all vary so much, I think also supports approval of what they're suggesting to get this 2.5 foot exception to front yard setback.
This is 670, so it's just the 8 foot.
Sorry, I
It's
was going to
okay.
ask about talking about both projects together. Because
Yeah, we
they're
don't.
side by
We
side.
want to refrain from doing that.
Yeah, okay, sorry. That'll be the next one, yeah, okay.
Commissioner Wyrick?
Mr. Baumann, would you care to venture a guess as to how many existing homes on Oak Street comply with the development standard as it's written today?
I could not, would have to refer to, or defer to what planning staff has to say.
Okay,
0.
okay. Any idea as to the average garage setback from the sidewalk?
From on the same side of the street and actually on the other side of the street as well, they're, like I said, it'd be hard to give an average. I would say about half of them are in front of the home opposed to flush or behind. And the other half are probably around 8 feet, maybe less.
From the not from the sidewalk, right?
No, from the front of the house.
Fair to say, though, that average setback for garages from the sidewalk would be more than 20 feet in that neighborhood?
Yes.
As is this one.
So
Yes, this one is as well. There's actually the length between the public right-of-way and the front of the garage is around 31 feet.
On this house.
Yes.
On this house.
On this house, correct.
Majority of the homes were developed right when this subdivision map was approved. When it was approved, it had the 20-foot from back of sidewalk, which provides our parking standard, right? 20 feet in length. And so what you see when you drive on this side of Oak Lane, which is part of this development, not the other side, but this side, that's when you're seeing the homes, and then you're seeing fronts stepped back to meet that 35 setback, which actually got a variance for 30, but you got 30 and 25 feet. So when we looked directly next door, we measured that using our GIS, it was at 20 feet from the back of the sidewalk.
Okay, so fair to say that if this floor plan was introduced as a floor plan of the original development, it would have been 100% conforming.
Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Barnett?
Do we know when the provision in the current code for the distance of the garage from the front of the house was enacted?
Looks like they're gonna take a look. When I was looking, I didn't see an ordinance that was specifying, I couldn't find one that was specifying that change, but the ordinance cited in that section at various places was from 2003, and this predates that significantly.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I do have a question kind of along those lines, and I don't know if there's anyone here who can answer it, but I will ask. Do we understand the intent of the revision of the code to move the garages 20 feet behind the frontage of the home?
Yeah, and that was what I originally wanted to accomplish when I was seeking for the ordinance that carried this through, was to ensure that my thoughts were the reason why it was implemented. My best guess, and I think probably the rest of staff and Director Gates, is that there was a time where I think it was around during the 80s where the garages were sticking out significantly in front of the home, maybe in the 70s even. And although that is the homeowners like that because they're further away from the street and it provides more privacy, it can be very off-putting to pedestrians walking, or some may say, although subjectively, that it's architecturally unattractive. I think we've seen variations in that span shorten over time, but I would guess that it was to encourage not having, those noses sticking out, so to say, and have a friendlier feeling when you're walking from a pedestrian perspective.
One other question. So, and again, this is just to reiterate and have it on record. So the setbacks, the 20-foot setbacks, you do not believe were associated with a safety issue. It's more aesthetic, is what I'm hearing.
Correct. And you do see it more in historical districts, so it could have been that it was the intention. A lot of times we see codes come through because of a specific project or concern, and maybe it just didn't fit this situation. And that happens, and that's part of planning.
And I just want to offer, I walked around that neighborhood. 6 existing homes have the garage in front of the house, the structure. 2 garages are in line with the front, one of which was, and this goes to my question, is directly across the street from these two lots. It looks like it's a fairly newly built home, and but the garage is about 45 feet back. It's farther back, but it's in line with the front of the house. So I'm assuming that was done after this period, but that still also is not in compliance with the, would be considered a variance.
Yeah, that could be the case. The other side of the street isn't part of this subdivision, too.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
One last comment. These two lots are the last two vacant lots, most likely because they are so short and they're challenging to design and build on. And I think to some degree, there should be some support for the property owner to go ahead and address that challenge, face it, take it on, and try to get two homes built on these lots that are very much in keeping with context of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, if no more questions from the commission, I'll open it up to the public for comment. Again, please state your name and spell for the record.
So I'm not here to provide public comment. We did circulate a petition.
Could you please state your name?
Yes,
for the
Richard
record?
Price, P-R-E-I-S-S. I will be speaking, but at the end, I wanted to hand in a petition that was circulated in the neighbors, and we have signatures of, I think it's around 20 people, so I'd like to hand that to staff. The petition is in opposition both on the notice provision and on the application itself. Now we have other people who would like to speak. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that the same petition that's already in the record as public comment that was received electronically?
No.
Thank you.
Is this a new one or additional names?
What happened is I handed off the petition yesterday to make sure that it was, but we have additional names as well. So what I'm handing in is the latest version with the most signatures.
Thank you for that
So that
clarification.
should supersede what I handed in yesterday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Roy Ann Florence. That's spelled R-O-Y, capital A-N-N-E, Florence, just like the city. And my husband Jerry and I live at 688 Oak Lane, which is directly next door to 670, the lot 670 in question. I note that in the notice that we received in a timely fashion did not include the lot at 660, which is also important to us. And as a kind of a side note, I'd like to note that when the notice went up on the lamp post in front of the lot, it was not the usual. It was a very flimsy piece of paper like that, and not a hard cardboard. Obviously, it ripped and tore, and nobody could read it anyhow. A couple of months ago, on a Saturday, I noticed a big machine, one of those ones that goes like that, in the empty lot next door. It was taking down all the tall weeds and vegetation it could get a hold of. Soon a man and a woman came to observe that work. I went out and introduced myself, asked them their names, how's their family, blah, 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 and what they were going to build and such. Very early the next day, it happened to be a Sunday, a larger machine was back to finish the job from Saturday. In addition to putting a hole in our fence, it removed several large trees at the rear of the lot. Those trees contained the nests of our neighborhood squirrels and ticked me off. Sometime after this, Mr. Santu and his son came for a petition for a variance for the garages. At the time, it seemed reasonable to us, and we signed the petition. Since then, we have learned of several issues that concern us greatly. Both Jerry and I rescind our signatures on that original petition. Another issue that alarms us, we've lived there for 12 and a half years in this same house. And during that time, the weeds always grew like weeds. The city would come in, or somebody came in, and cut them down at least twice a year because they posed an obvious fire hazard. When walking our dogs recently, there wasn't a hint of vegetation on the lot. At first, we were very happy to see all the foxtails gone. But then we wondered how the lot could be so slick. Then I learned from a neighbor that she had seen a couple of workers recently with large canisters spraying the entire lot, which I can only assume was some sort of an herbicide. I think that should alarm us all. As a cancer survivor who's undergone 60 chemo treatments, that really concerns me. We hope, the neighbors hope, that Mr. Sandhu will sit down with the neighbors collectively and address our concerns. I'm certain we can come to a resolution that is acceptable to them and to us. Right now, it's not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Greg Johnson. My wife and I have lived on the lot next door to these two vacant lots for 27 years. And we have significant safety issues regarding the setback, 20 feet versus 8 feet. And I'd like to talk about those. First of all, we think Oak Lane is different from many streets in town. It's a one-block street. It runs from Patton to France. Because of that, a lot of people consider it a safe street. So there are lots of traffic on that street. I don't mean cars and vehicles and trucks, but people. There's walkers with children. There's kids in strollers. There's moms on phones. There's kids on bikes, scooters, kids by themselves, many, many dog walkers. Dog walkers are kind of a different case because they're frequently distracted by whatever their dog is doing, where it's going. So some folks on the sidewalk, many in the street, because it's perceived to be a safe street to walk on. That's more traffic than usual, and I think we should be concerned about where the cars are located in the driveways and how close they are, and what's the likelihood that they could miss somebody or that somebody could miss them as they're walking back and forth. This is a house design, and I know we have nothing to say about the design, but it's only got one garage. So it's not just a possibility that there would be cars parked in front of the garage. It's a probability. Cars, by the way, are, I went around and sort of measured some of the cars. There's a kind of a minor variation. The smallest one was 13 feet, and the largest was 17 feet. So there's some pretty deep cars that'll be parked probably in front of this garage that's been moved back or moved forward. The requested variance on 670 Oak Lane moves the garage closer to the street by 12 feet, 20 versus 8. This also moves cars parked in front of the garage closer to the sidewalk and to the street. The site diagram with the variance looks like a 31-foot garage door to sidewalk distance. It's kind of hard to see that. In fact, I had to use a magnifying glass to take a look at it myself. But with a one-car garage, vehicles will be parked in the driveway, and those vehicles will be close to the sidewalk and close to the street. With an average parked car in the driveway, and I just took 16 feet long, and a short parking distance away from the garage so the car isn't butted right up against the garage door, there'll be about 11 feet from the bumper of the car to the sidewalk. Not very long. It's less probably than from here to the wall. Pickup trucks, which is something will be parked there doing the building, and whenever there's maintenance, will have a shorter distance than the 11 feet. In either case, whether it's a regular sedan or a pickup truck or an SUV, there's not much distance for a driver backing out from in front of the garage to see people on the sidewalk or on the street, giving the driver a shorter reaction time to anybody walking by, dog walker, child, mother on a stroller. More important, though, is there's not much distance for the people to have a reaction time going by that driveway with a car coming out, maybe. This is all with the recommended 8-foot distance of the garage itself from the front. The requested garage variance, this is just my 2 cents, 20 feet down to 8 feet, may allow more floor area for the developer, but it creates a safety hazard, potentially, for all of these people going up and down this street. And because it's a one-car garage, there's going to be a lot of parking in front of that garage and a lot of shorter distance for people backing out. So it's good for the developer, but it creates a clear safety hazard for all the people using the sidewalk or street on Oak Lane. The Planning Commission should not allow the variance for good safety reasons. Thank you.
Thank you. With regard to others who want to make comments, are there others who will make a comment that is different from what was submitted or different from what we've heard already? Okay, come on up.
Hi, my name is Paul Luca, L-U-C-A. I'd like to make a couple of points, but first I'd like to correct something that Robert Bauman said. He's an extraordinary architect. In fact, he designed our house, which is right across the street, which is the one that has the 40-foot setback. The reason that these lots were not developed before was not because there were challenges. It's because they were not offered for sale. For decades, real estate... Certainly. Is that better, sir? Thank you. For a long time, a lot of real estate agents were begging the owners to sell the lots, and for whatever reasons they didn't. And then, when they were offered for sale, the applicant bought them on the first day, which of course is their right. But it's not because that the lots were not saleable or not developable. It was just that they were on the ball and they jumped on a prime property on what's considered a prime street. So I just wanted to correct that. There also seems to be a lot of emphasis on the fact that this was in an older subdivision with certain rules and that it would comply with those rules. But those rules have been changed, and for a reason. Now, it's hypothesized that the reason was aesthetic and not safety, but I didn't look at the legislative history to see exactly what they were, and apparently the staff did not either. But I would say that common sense tells you that safety is a huge issue. And the fact that the structures on Oak Lane do not comply with current setback requirements is not the point. The prior setback requirements were deliberately changed to remedy perceived issues. If variance and exceptions are granted primarily due to the existence of older structures that do not comply with current zoning, it would thwart the intent of zoning changes that were enacted for what we presume are good reasons: safety, aesthetics, noise, fumes, etc. That fact is bolstered by the fact that several things have changed over the decades since that subdivision was there, and I believe, if I understood the testimony correctly, that the change in the garage setback predates 2003. So that's over 20 years. During that time, vehicles have gotten much larger. For example, a pickup truck, and it's not just as my neighbor says, while there's work there, a lot of people own pickup trucks. Pickup trucks and large SUVs now far outsell small sedans. And again, we understand that the design is not an issue, but it is likely that there'll be not only one, but probably two cars parked in front of there. When you have two cars, it'll be protruding into the sidewalk, or very close to the sidewalk. And this has to do with reaction times. If you're walking down the street and you see that a vehicle is running, if you're a prudent pedestrian, you will give that due notice. But if the reverse lights are not on in the car, you assume the person's putting their seatbelt on or whatever. It's only when the reverse lights come on that a pedestrian says, oh, well, if this guy doesn't see me, I should stop. And the distance between having 2 feet and 20 feet or 8 feet and 28 feet is a huge a huge difference. And I think that that should be taken into account. Now, I can't tell you that that is the reason for the setback, but it certainly is a good reason for the setback. The other thing that I find anomalous is when they say that the design is in keeping with the neighborhood, is that a lot of the houses, as has been pointed out, the garages are actually in front. So obviously people thought that that was not a good idea and they wanted to change that. So you can't just say, well, that's the way that it was 40 years ago. Let's continue the problem. So I think that that's something that should be taken into account. In terms of the challenges of building on the lot, you'll notice that the lot of one of our prior neighbors who spoke, there is a relatively large house on what is, I believe, still 2 lots. On our house, it was formerly 2 lots. I believe the lots have been merged, but people said, look, it doesn't make sense to build a house for practical purposes, for complying with the law, safety purposes, on small lots. What the developer is trying to do is to build 2 relatively large 3-bedroom houses on 2 lots that do not support that. Now, they could do that and comply with all the relevant laws and enhance the safety and the appearance of the houses, but they choose not to do that because they would lose some square footage. I suggested when the developers came and spoke with us that they might be better served by building one larger house on the 2 lots. I don't think they would be financially hurt by that. And because they wouldn't have setback requirements between 2 structures, they'd be able to actually build a larger house while still complying with the law. For whatever reason, and it's certainly their right, they did not seem to entertain that. But I really don't think that we should say that the developer is faced with an unfair burden. If they want to build 2 structures, they can build 2 smaller structures that comply with the law. If they want to merge the lots and build a larger structure, they can certainly do that. One little aside on the 2-lot solution that the developer prefers is that if you grant the variance, the houses will be bigger than they otherwise would be. That, of course, is going to translate into a higher purchase price, which naturally excludes more people. So if the purpose is to include more people in the neighborhood, granting the variances is antithetical to that. And I think that's about it. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments on this particular project? All right, so we'll close the comment period. Oh, okay, one last comment, sir.
Thank you very much. Richard Price, P-R-E-I-S-S, and I thank the board for giving us the opportunity to present our case, and I appreciate the staff report. Congratulations on being named chair, or my condolences under certain circumstances. So just to be clear, I'm a licensed professional planner. I was a principal and vice president of a planning firm which had offices in New York City and in Hoboken. I practiced for 40 years. I still maintain my planning license, and I still occasionally practice, and I've been involved in variances of this nature. On many occasions, I've testified under oath over 2,000 times. I've been deemed an expert in planning and have testified in 20 court cases. I've represented cities and smaller communities. I've represented developers and nonprofits. So I understand how difficult it is when faced with this kind of decision, what you have to take into consideration. I would just like to say a few things. I was very disconcerted by the actions of the applicant. First of all, they came in on a Saturday, worked late into the night, used heavy equipment. There was no attempt to control the dust. There was no attempt to control the noise. They came back early on a Sunday, which I believe is prohibited under your code, and cleared the rest of the property the same thing. There were several large trees on the property, including along the back, where if you built a house today, those houses could have been retained with the footprint that you have. However, they took those houses down, so there was no consideration to that. Also, subsequently, as indicated, and I have a neighbor who works in the agricultural business, and he basically said what they used to control the weeds was Roundup. There was no notification to the neighborhood. Somebody came in and sprayed it, and people walk by, their neighbors who live there, their dogs that go on that property. Again, no consideration. It is true that the applicant came by and showed plans. I invited him to my house. He showed me the plans. I said that I, as personally, and the neighborhood would be able to support the application if they made certain changes. I said, you have a right to develop the property, you have a right to make money, but please could you send me a copy of the plans? I gave him my email address, my phone number. I did not hear from the applicant again. The next thing I got was the notice, so that was disconcerting. I also, after we had a neighborhood meeting, I called the applicant and I said to the applicant, the neighbors have concerns about the application. We don't want to go before the Planning Commission and fight it out in public. We don't want to head down the road towards litigation, to delay your application, to spend your time and our time and resources. Please, could you delay the application and meet with the neighborhood so that we could come to a reasonable result? And they refused. So I'm very disconcerted that they proceeded with the application. There is that. In regard to the safety issues, one of the things I want to say is that the concern that we have is when you build a house, a 3-bedroom house, that is this small and essentially has no yard. You have the minimum setbacks, rear and side yard setbacks. There is no place for storage. So in these kinds of cases, it's very typical that the homeowner will never use the garage for parking. They will store grills, skiing equipment, bicycles, and other things, whatever it is. So our concern is that not only will there be a single car parked in the driveway, but 2 cars parked in the driveway. And that obviously is a concern in terms of health and safety. The other thing is that in terms of the so-called hardship that is being presented, I believe that that's a self-created hardship, and having been a planner, I've seen this a number of times. The fact is that this lot is very small, undersized. So too is the neighbor, but we'll get to that the next time. And so when you do that and you draw in the setbacks, that shrinks your footprint. And so you're not able under those circumstances, under these circumstances, when you have that footprint and you comply with all of the requirements to obtain the maximum floor area ratio, the FAR of 0.35. The only way that you do that is to violate the setbacks, which is what the applicant has done by pushing the garage 12 feet closer to the property. If the applicant complied with that requirement, the footprint would shrink. That is a self-created hardship. If the applicant wants to build a larger house, then he should buy a larger lot. Or if he wants to maximize the floor area ratio, as my neighbor Paul Lucas suggested, he could combine the 2 lots and build a single house. he gets back the space that would act as a side yard setback on either side, he would be able to 100% comply with all of the setbacks and have more than enough space. So the fact that he is proceeding with an application for 2 houses and then says, because the lot is small and I bought it, I need a variance. And to me, the self-created hardship is the fact that he's bought a smaller property. If he complies with the requirement, then he would lose that internal space. And if that has an impact on the sale of the property or its usability, that's his problem. He could push the garage back. He would lose a bedroom. That too is you still have a reasonably sized house. And so I don't believe that there is a hardship sufficient for the grant of a variance. The other thing I would say is that I know we're not supposed to talk about the adjacent property, but essentially,
For the interest of time, let's not talk about the adjacent property.
okay. Well,
because we do need to move along and consider that as well.
And we will limit our comments because we're, on that. But I will say this, is essentially what the applicant is proposing is 2 mirror images of the same house. Very small. It's not in keeping, and particularly in regard to having the garage moved forward. It provides a very flat appearance, and the 2 mirror image identical is not in keeping with the neighborhood. As indicated in your general plan, there are 2 requirements under the community development element. The first is new residential development should not, excuse me, I need my glasses. It says new residential development should emulate the desirable characteristics of existing neighborhoods. Well, this does not. This is a much smaller house than is provided in the neighborhood. And nowhere else in Sonoma do I know of any other circumstances where you have 2 identical houses next to one another. The second community development element requirement is to retain the unique small-town character of the community and the integrity of its neighborhood through detailed prescriptions from block form site planning. In this particular case, having 2 identical houses side by side is not in keeping with the characteristics of the neighborhood, and I think would be a detriment to the character not only of our street, but to the neighborhood and to Sonoma in general. I don't believe that the applicant has met their burden for the variance. I believe that the hardship that has been indicated is self-created. I don't believe that there's any merit to their application. I also think that if the applicant went ahead and built the houses in conformance, we would welcome them to the neighborhood, even though it's not part of the planning review, and we understand in California that's not a requirement. We would hope that there would be variation in the design of the 2 homes, and one of the things I'm concerned about.
May I, let's not talk about design review.
Okay, let me just say this, is that the applicant in their phone call that I had with them yesterday said their intent is to get the variances. This is not the final design. They may change that. And my concern is that what you're seeing is not what's going to be built. So under that circumstances, I would just ask the Planning Commission if they do intend to go ahead and adopt this and grant an approval, that essentially they require the applicant to build the houses as shown in these plans. We do not want 2 identical houses side by side.
All right,
thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so I will now close the public comment, and I'll turn it out to commissioners for comment.
Well,
Commissioner Barnett.
if we could bring up that photograph of the, there you go. I'm not really sure what to make of these concerns about cars parked in front of garages. If you look to the left of this photograph, I don't know what the address of it is, but it's the house to the far left. There are 2 cars parked in front of what is obviously a 2-car garage, which is flush with the setback of the home. This is a condition that is so common in the city of Sonoma that the comment about people not using their garage is absolutely correct, and I've never known or even could think of what we could do about it. The fact is that people don't use their garages to park their cars. Now, my question for staff is the issue of safety has been raised. Is there a history of injury to pedestrians, walkers, people with baby carriages, or dogs on this street that we know of?
Well, I've only been here a short time, but I haven't heard anything since my time here. But I think more importantly, and a more factual statement I can make, is that it meets the standards of a driveway. It meets the public works standards of a driveway. It meets our development code. So there's nothing about this plan that would indicate a more unsafe or a safety issue, or that it's a driveway that is less safe than another one or poses more of a threat.
Okay, and actually, this issue of a car parking in the driveway in front of the garage, in this particular case, the cars would be further. A car parked in front of the garage, a single car parked in front of the garage, would have more clearance behind it to the sidewalk than this car that's illustrated in the photograph right now.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I think that's addressing two issues that I had. Is there a history of injuries and accidents on this street? And I don't live on that street. I live 4 streets away. And I would just say that if someone who lives on the street and who's lived there for a long time, Mr. Lynch has lived on the street for a long time, if he's aware of any serious injuries caused by cars pulling out of their driveways, now would be a good time to hear about it. The development code language that was quoted is not prescriptive. It talks about an aspiration. And as such, the development code you're quoting actually contains language which I would describe as subjective, and it no longer complies with state law. State law requires that the development code not use subjective language as it pertains to development standards. So the notion of the provisions that were addressed in Mr. Price's comments are not shall statements. They are not prescriptive. They do not dictate what someone is allowed to do. It simply indicates a largely aesthetic preference on the part of the city. Now, I was actually on the city council in 2003, and for 9 years or 11 years before that, I was on the council for a total of 12 years. The provision for the garages being set back 20 feet from the front of the structural line was associated with a discussion happening at the time, which generally fell under the rubric of the new urbanism. And the new urbanism philosophy was one which attempted to replicate development patterns of an earlier period, specifically as close as it could get to the development pattern of having garages actually separate from the domicile itself, set at the back or the end of the driveway. The notion was that this was a more preferable pattern. It was more welcoming as a streetscape. It reduced the dominance of the automobile as a presence on the street or in the driveways, and it was a pattern that at the time was seen as a more preferable development approach. A lot of things have changed since then. Certainly a vast amount of housing law has changed, none of which will particularly pertain to the issue of where a garage is. But you will see in certain areas of town where the lots are large enough that there are properties with a garage set back off the structure of the home entirely and set back in the rear part of the driveway. On smaller lots, that's obviously not practical. And these are both somewhat substandard size lots. And so all that said, the one thing this commission has no purview over is what a house looks like. And in retrospect, I think that's a good thing. I don't think that I would like to be in the position of telling someone what their house can look like. And this is a matter of individual choice. For example, one of the issues that gets raised frequently at meetings is someone who wants to put a second floor on a house. And the neighbors come out and say, well, you can't let them put a second floor on the house. That's going to invade the privacy of our backyard. People are going to be able to see what we're doing back there. I'm always curious about what people are doing in their backyards that they feel, you know, they don't want people to see. But putting that aside, you can put a second floor on a house in Sonoma and you don't have to even ask permission. You can do it by right. And that's true of every home in Sonoma. That's the rule. That's the law. So, you know, there are things that people do in designing their homes. Sometimes it's a developer who makes the decision. Sometimes it's a homeowner who's having a house built. But these are the adaptations we all have to make as neighbors in a community to accept the fact that the property rights that people have are in many cases property rights we would not want to give up. And I've come to respect that reality here in Sonoma.
Thank you. Commissioner Willers?
First, I'd like to say that I, just as a matter of openness, I discussed this project with the applicant. Early on, he was seeking professional help at the time and was asking me if I could help him. I told him that I was not comfortable doing that because I was going to be on the planning commission and I would like to hear the application, but I recommended to him that if he felt that it was valuable, that he should pursue this action. He should pursue a variance from the standpoint of the use of his property. I've had no conversations with any of the neighbors. None of them have reached out to me. So also being part of the design development task force at the time that the current development code was being written in 2003, as Larry said, the kind of 20 feet behind the front of the property requirement for the garage came from a purely aesthetic, new urbanism form of development as a way of fitting new, primarily with the concept and intent of taking new, larger subdivisions and creating subdivisions that were more in character with the traditional fabric of our town. It was not anything related to safety. In fact, you know, in this neighborhood, the subdivision map describes the required setback to the garage door or to the garage of 20 feet from the rear of the setback. That's what all of the neighbors have enjoyed of their properties, whether they built it or bought it. They've enjoyed that additional space on their property that has allowed not only the homes that were built previously to be as large as they are, but also probably to exceed the floor area ratio in their current, although previous development pattern under a previous development code. It's my opinion. I actually went on Google Earth also and surveyed the depth of all of the driveways in the neighborhood, and the deepest one is Mr. Luca's. It's approximately 40 feet off of the back of sidewalk, but he also has a horseshoe driveway that it basically is one of the reasons that it's so far back. But also the average, there are about 3 or more that are 20 feet in depth. And then the remainder are 25 to 27 feet off of the back of the sidewalk. And, what was being requested in the variance is 31 feet. It's actually deeper than what the average is in the neighborhood. I don't believe that there's a safety issue at 31 feet. I also don't believe there's a safety issue at 20 feet, as currently basically proven in this neighborhood that no one has been injured with cars being parked in front of driveways on driveway pads that are only 20 feet deep. So I think I can make all of the findings. I think these are constricted lots. One of them has a unique shape. The 2 are smaller than the average lots that are within the subdivision. I think that the variance is perfectly acceptable. All of the other planning standards have been met by the applicant. And I would say that, what this also allows is that is for the applicant to maintain a 1-story house within the FAR, rather than having to take the house to a 2nd floor to make the same square footage and the same saleability. So in terms of the character of the neighborhood, all of the houses in the neighborhood are primarily 1-story buildings, and that in and of itself is something that's compatible in my mind. So I'm in support of the request for variance for this property.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Commissioner Wyrick? Vice Chair Wyrick.
Oh, thank you, Chair. First and foremost, I just want to thank my neighbors, actually. I'm on Patton Street, for coming out tonight and for taking interest and studying these issues. I can tell you, as somebody who lives in your neighborhood, roughly, but outside the conflict area, that I appreciate your concern, and your concerns are heard. In this case, the applicant is requesting a variance from current development standards so that the home that's placed on this lot within the Vintage Estate subdivision can enjoy the same standard as the other homes in the Vintage Estate subdivision, which will have the effect of allowing it to integrate more seamlessly into its environment and enjoy the same general design flexibility that was afforded to the rest of the homes in that development. The applicant's requesting a garage setback, I think, in 670 of 31 feet from the sidewalk, when the neighborhood average to me appears to be less than that. This house plan would be compliant and conforming with the previous Vintage Estate subdivision map when it was first approved. I think that it's within the context of this neighborhood, and it doesn't really constitute a significant deviation. 670 is the smallest lot on Oak Street, which I think goes to unique characteristics required in the findings for a variance in this case. I would go so far as to say that to deny a variance would be to deny the applicant substantial property characteristics that surrounding properties enjoy. And lastly, I reject the concept that approving this variance for a garage setback poses any sort of a safety issue. I hope that anybody with a concern around garage setback that have driveways greater to or equal than what's being proposed are parking on the street. And for those reasons, I can support a variance in this case and make those findings. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Neill?
On the face of it, this variance does have a lot of value. I am really uncomfortable with the way that the neighbors have been treated. I'm very uncomfortable with the fact that it seems like this dialogue that should have been happening way before this got to the Planning Commission hasn't happened, and that work is happening on the property without respect to the neighbors' enjoyment of their properties. So I have to put that aside as I look at this, but I will say that caution, if you don't get along with your neighbors during this process, the whole thing's going to be extra hard. So if you're not working with your neighbors side by side and making sure that you're addressing their concerns before it gets to this forum, you're making a mistake and you're making your job harder. So I will ask you to do everything you can to get into good communication with those neighbors and address their concerns. And some of their concerns may not be something you can get around, but some of them you can. And certainly the hours that you work loud equipment is certainly one of them. I do think that these lots, they're legal lots. They can be built on. Two-story houses could go in there. They could do all kinds of different things. So to the neighbors, I'd say this proposal is not as bad as it could get. I mean, we got SB 9, and who knows what we could do with some of these lots, really cramming in more people there. So I'd say that, again, I'm telling the developer to work with you, and if you'll kindly work with the developer. I think that these are viable projects, and I think that we need more housing, and this is obviously a very attractive neighborhood, and you guys are very attractive neighbors, and so people are going to want to purchase here, and hopefully it'll be a quality project that will add to the neighborhood and the ambiance and the community. So overall, I'm in support of this variance with the caution that get along with your neighbors.
Any other commissioners?
I concur with my fellow commissioners. I would be repeating what they have already stated.
And my last comments are, again, there are many things that I echo from the other commissioners. I will say that I agree with some of the comments. I do not feel that the applicant's special circumstances are very special. There are other opportunities. They could have a smaller house. They could have a two-story house. And yet they chose to keep the one-story and still try to maintain the FAR. Everything else they're doing is in compliance. I'm also, on the flip side, struggling with this code that puts a garage back 20 feet. And the genesis of that code being more aesthetic. So this may be a code we might want to revisit so that there isn't this kind of restriction. With regard to the safety issue, again, I'm not seeing a compelling, I think the language in the letter was deleterious impact based on what we've heard today. The one thing I would ask the staff, just for clarification, is that there are requirements when noise can happen and when building can happen, and I just want to make certain that that's part of the clear contingency for approval.
We always include in the conditions of approval the hours in which a building permit can be utilized. I will say I am not aware. I'll let Natalie speak to that part. If she was aware of Roundup, we were not called. We were called when the tractors came out, and so we did look into that at that time and making sure what they were doing wasn't triggering a building permit. So when we do recommend that if things are being seen or concerns are being raised, that they do need to call us and let us know so that we can get out and investigate what's going on.
Okay, thank you. So with that, and this conversation, thank you all for bringing all of this information to our attention and demonstrating your concern and articulating those things that you are concerned with. And I appreciate all the conversation. I know it may have seemed difficult, but I appreciate the conversation we had at the beginning around the initial noticing. So at this time, I would like to ask a motion for approval of this agenda item.
I'll make the motion. I would move to approve the application for the variance in item 5.1 to allow for modifications. Oh, excuse me. I would like to strike that and make a motion to approve a variance reducing the garage setback requirement for the new single-family dwelling to be constructed at 670 Oak Lane.
I'll second.
And we'll have a roll call, please, Natalie.
Commissioner Barnett,
Aye.
Commissioner Nugent,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes.
Commissioner Willers,
Yes.
Vice Chair WIRICK,
Yes.
Chair Dambach,
Yes.
Youth Member Pedersen.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
There's been a request for a 5-minute recess. All right, so we'll move on to item 5.3, which is a discussion, consideration, and possible action to approve a variance and exception, reducing the garage setback from the front setback requirement for a single-family dwelling to be constructed at 660 Oak Lane.
All right, thank you for that. This is a very similar request to what was just discussed for the previous project, although there is a minor deviation that is being requested in the form of an exception as well. So the site location is at 660 Oak Lane. It's 6,732 square feet within the Central East planning area and is zoned low density residential. Again, the new home itself is not subject to approval by the board. It is just the variance and exception that we are seeking. Sorry about that. So the variance request is for an 8-foot garage setback from the front of the house, where the development code provides for a 20-foot setback requirement from the front of the house. The applicant is also seeking an exception for a reduction in the front setback requirement from 25 feet to 22 feet 5.5 inches. As detailed in the staff report and demonstrated in the slide is the 8-foot setback from the front of the home. And again, we have the front porch sticking out a little bit further, as well as the eave, which kind of create more of a setback from a visible standpoint. Also demonstrated in the slide is the 22 foot 5.5 inch front setback, which is approximately 2.5 feet over the minimum requirement for a front setback that is outlined in the subdivision map, but 2.5 feet short from what's in the current development code. So again, the subdivision map provides for a garage setback with a minimum of 20 feet from the public right-of-way, which they meet and exceed. It also provides for a front setback of 20 feet, and the proposed front setback is 22 feet 5.5 inches, and so that is also exceeded. You'll recognize this slide from the last item, showing the constructions of the, oh, I'm sorry, I'm ahead of myself. Showing the construction of the homes with slight variations in front setbacks is indicated on the subdivision map, and other garages are not set back that far from the front of the home. Again, we're just looking at the depth here, that's what's being demonstrated, and overall lot size to get a better idea of the site constraints. Here's just some images again showing the existing homes in the subdivision. And here are the findings that are required to meet the grant for the variance. In summary, the garage setback would not pose any inconsistencies with the general plan or other plan. The lot's smaller size and shorter length compared to the other lots limits the owner's ability to utilize the lot in the same fashion that the other homes have, particularly in regard to FAR and rear yard space if the strict application of the code were enforced. Granting the variance would not create a special privilege to this property that cannot be enjoyed by other properties, as this project is in compliance with the subdivision map that all of the other properties were developed under. There is no impact to public health, safety, or welfare as a result of the request. And for the exception findings, in summary of what has been provided in the resolution, approval of the request would not create inconsistencies with the general plan or any other plan. And as discussed in the report, the parcel is smaller in square foot and lot depth, and historic development patterns of this subdivision have been based on the approved subdivision map, in which the project does comply with. Granting the exception would not pose an issue to public health, safety, or welfare, and would not negatively impact the properties in the vicinity. And staff is recommending that if the Planning Commission determines the findings be met, that they approve.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the staff or the representative from the commissioners? Commissioner Willard?
So I want to be clear. So the subdivision building setback line was 20 feet on the original map. And the requirement for setback in our code is 25?
It's the average of the two properties on either
Okay,
side.
so- Thank you.
Any other questions? I will open up for public comment on this second parcel.
Hi, my name's Robert Bauman. B-A-U-M-A-N-N. So the issues regarding the variance are the same as what we previously talked about. The issue regarding exception, it was the intent of the property owners to have a varying degree of setback of the front of the house. I think per guidelines of the original development, just to add that interest, staff supported that. So I just wanted to point that out. And also that I believe that a lot of this application for both parcels is one of property rights. I think as the commission has seen to agree with, they are not asking for any exception to FAR or coverage, and the things that they are requesting are being approved by staff. Again, available for questions if you have any.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
My name is Paul Luca, L-U-C-A. I'd like to reiterate for the record the comments that I made on the variance with regard to the adjacent property. But as far as the exception on this property, I find it very interesting that someone says they would like variance by having something closer to the street. If you'd like variance, you could certainly push back a little bit further, and I think that would be preferable to everybody, certainly to all of the neighbors. So I don't think that it's a justification to build something well closer to the road than the currently existing code, which again I presume is for a very good reason, just to get variance. Otherwise, the law says 100, let's do 50, because that would be different. So I don't think that that's a very valid argument. With respect to the safety issues, there was an issue a couple of years ago with the hedges on Oak Lane, because one of the commissioners asked whether or not there was any history of safety, near misses, etc. There was a near miss with a young lady with a stroller, and she was very alarmed by a car backing out, and she checked the law and found that there was a maximum requirement of the hedges of being 3.5 feet high, and one of my neighbors had to trim their hedges for that. So there obviously are concerns. I've also spoken to a number of the neighbors who live in the houses that their garages are close to the street, and they say that's a negative feature of their house, but that's what the house was built as, that's what they were faced with, and they find that they have to be super cautious. And in fact, one of them said she did have a close call and was shaking afterwards with 3 children with umbrellas. So it's not like there aren't safety concerns. And I guess I'm a little mystified where someone would say, well, the changes were made, and I do appreciate the history of why the garage setbacks were made, but they were made for a reason, and they are the existing laws. So to just discard them so that someone can build a larger house or 2 houses instead of 1, I really think is antithetical to the purpose of the zoning and the reliance of the neighbors on the zoning. When we bought our house, we knew what the zoning was. We did an extensive renovation, including the so-called horseshoe driveway. And one of the reasons why we did that, even though it cost us extra money, etc., was so that we could pull out front-wise and be able to see things. And so we obviously thought that was important enough that we would preserve that feature. And I still believe that the people who enacted the zoning, if that wasn't their predominant reason, they must have had it in mind that having cars further back from the street not only had safety issues, but also fumes, noise. I don't think anyone would argue that if someone leaves their car running a few feet away from the sidewalk, that poses more of a risk and certainly annoyance in terms of fumes and noise, and if someone has a radio playing, etc. So we understand that this is what people do. No one's saying you can't park in your driveway, but given the fact that people will park in their driveway, perhaps 2 cars in a driveway, I think that we should say the zoning people thought of that, and they thought what was appropriate, and that is the existing law. So to change that when there's no hardship, it just means that somebody would be able to build a house in keeping with what they knew they could build as of right when they purchased it, and I presume what they paid for the lot was based on what could be built as of right. So it's just a windfall for a developer to say, oh, you bought some small lots, you paid a certain price for it, but now we're going to let you build a bigger house that doesn't comply with the law to the detriment of everyone else on the street. I really am struggling to find the rationale for that. So thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you.
Good evening, Richard Price, P-R-E-I-S-S. I'm at 625 Oak Lane. I just wanted to, for the record, reiterate the same concerns I have with this application as the previous one with regard to the notice and with regard to also the substantive issues. And I would just once again ask the board, to the extent that the plans are approved, that the a condition is added to that approval that the floor plans and elevations that are shown on the plan are the ones that actually get built. We in the neighborhood, despite the fact that we've voiced our objections, would prefer to see those designs rather than something that we've never seen before. And we are concerned about the having 2 identical look-alike houses put on our property. We don't think that that's going to conform to the neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Greg Johnson. I live at 650 Oak Lane. Just one thing, I'm a little concerned that the Planning Commission seems to be comfortable that there are no safety issues because nothing has happened so far. There is a risk. It's a 1-block street. There's a lot of activity on the street, more than there is usually. And then another thing is, this is a house with a single garage, just barely fitting 1 car. People are going to park on that driveway behind the garage. Somebody mentioned that 2 cars could be parked on that driveway. I don't think we should ignore completely the risk that there are safety issues of people backing out or extra cars parking on the street because of the size of the room that they have for parking. Safety is a risk. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other public comments? I will close the public comment section and ask commissioners for any follow-up comments. Commissioner, Vice Chair WIRICK.
Thank you. I do believe I need to state for the record that I had ex parte communication with an interested party. In this case, it was a signer of one of the petitions here, the Izetta family that live on the corner of Oak Street and Patton Street. And as to the merits of the variance and the exception relating to this lot, I will make my findings based on the same rationale that I already stated, which in this case includes the exception as well as the variance.
Any other comments? Commissioner Willers?
For the variance, the same comments that I made prior. In relationship to the exception, I actually think it's beneficial to have the exception of the staggered setbacks. It was in the original, it was evident that it was an original subdivision intent to have at least varying setbacks to the fronts of the buildings. The setback that was designated for this lot, and I'm assuming it was intended to be 20 feet from the street primarily because it's a small lot, as the one adjacent it, which is a little wider, has a slightly deeper setback, and then the one which comes off as the joined lot on the corner its original setback is also 20 feet from the building setback line. So I think the exception is acceptable, and I think the variance, for the same reasons stated prior, is a valid variance.
Thank you. Any other comments? Commissioner Barnett?
Actually, it's more of a question. A question has been raised as to whether or not it's the purview of this commission to require that a specific plan or design be codified in our motion if we approve it. Is that within our purview?
If it were a design review, you could do that, condition it. And in design review, you typically do say that the plan submitted needs to be substantially similar to what was approved. In this case, there is no design review.
Thank you.
You're just approving where the new lines, the new setbacks would be.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? I'll just end by saying that I think I can speak for the commission that we do care about safety. And I think what we're trying to weigh up here is this request adding any additional burden to that safety? Accidents can happen, even if you have a car that's parked deep into a lot as it's backing up. These things may happen. So I just want to reiterate that we are considering that and trying to weigh whether there's an inordinate increase in that risk of safety versus another situation. With regard to the exception, again, I hear what the comments are, but I would have to say we're talking about how many? 3 feet?
2.5.
2.5 feet. And so I'm wondering if that's even really going to be that obvious. It's not like it's 5 feet or 10 feet. So, and finally, with regard to Mr. Luca, we do have codes and we do try to maintain those codes, and we don't always understand the intent. And that's why we ask. And sometimes we'll change the codes. You know, there may be a question of why we have a 25-foot setback. Why can't it be 10 feet or 15 feet? So it's a question that we may want to address in future code amendments. But it is the nature that we will need variances, and we may need to adapt based on the circumstance, and that's the discretionary body that is before you. So we do try to ensure that most things are ministerial, but sometimes there are circumstances that are complex and have to come in front of this body. So with that, I would open up for and ask a motion for approval.
I would make a motion to approve a variance and exception reducing the garage setback and front setback requirement for a new single-family dwelling to be constructed at 660 Oak Lane.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Barnett,
Aye.
Commissioner Nugent,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes.
Commissioner Willers,
Yes.
Vice Chair WIRICK,
Yes.
Chair DAMBACH, sorry,
Yes.
and Youth Member Pedersen.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
And again, thank you so much for your participation. Now we'll move on. We do have a hard stop at 10, so we'll try to be as efficient as we can. But we'll move on to item 6.1, which is receiving a presentation on the green and blue infrastructure. This was put on the agenda at the request of prior Chair Barnett with the intent to educate us, to ensure that we understand the intent of and the definition of the green-blue infrastructure as it is related to Sonoma. So I welcome the first speaker.
Hello, my name is Sidra Nathan. I'm
thrilled to be here speaking to you all. And this will be fun. We have great photos for you all, and we've got great speakers, so we're going to end on a high note tonight. Let me first, you have the...
Is that the green-blue infrastructure slides?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but while they're putting that up, I'll give you an introduction as to who I am, because some of you know some of this, but I managed about 15,000 acres of land in San Diego as executive director of a network of research stations. For comparison, Sonoma is about 2,000 acres at 2.7 square miles. I was also associate vice president for impact at the San Diego Community Foundation, which manages 2,500 separate funds from donors and a little bit over $1 billion in assets. So those are all that's to say that I'm familiar with research grants and donor funds and what drives people and what attracts people for research dollars and donor dollars. But probably more important for being in Sonoma is I come from a farming family. My mom was in the arts. I have a undergraduate degree in biology and economics. And some of you know this story, but when I went to go get my graduate degree, I was inspired from drinking wine here in Sonoma. I started off insanely studying ecosystem function, thinking about mosquitoes and impacts of biodiversity. And then I was sitting in Sonoma and I thought, why am I studying mosquitoes in Wisconsin? Not only is it cold, but mosquitoes, that's just insane. I instead could be studying eco-labels and wine and sustainable Sonoma, and immediately switched. And that is exactly, this was before I moved here. I didn't even know I was going to be living here. And that really began my love affair with Sonoma. So with that, that is, gives you a little bit of background about why I have come to, why I love Sonoma and why I do the kinds of things I do with the people here. So with that, that is the background of why I'm talking to you about green-blue infrastructure. Next slide, please. Okay, so what is green-blue infrastructure? This is a planning approach that blends green spaces, like tree-covered trails, which are also known as cool canopies, parks, trees, gardens, with blue spaces, namely streams, wetlands, waterways, into this connected wet network. And it weaves it through our urban infrastructure. So we know what gray infrastructure is. This is green infrastructure and blue infrastructure woven together into one system. And it links our parks, our trails into a cohesive and functional system. Instead of treating land use and transportation and housing as separate issues, sort of like you've heard people come up and talk about the land use element or safety issues as separate, distinct elements, kind of like the blind man with the elephant, where they're looking at the trunk as a snake or the tail as a piece of rope. These aren't separate issues. This is one Sonoma. This is one city that we really love. And so that's what green and blue infrastructure is. It's about treating Sonoma as a city that's a cohesive, unified element with the green and blue infrastructure woven throughout the city to bring together a unified element and a unified framework for how we think about general planning. Next slide, please. So this slide really shows you that this is better for everyone when all those elements work together. And as you can see from this visual image, housing and land use, environmental resources, circulation and transportation, all that, those issues are better when they are working hand in glove and we think about planning in terms of meeting the needs of people. And so if you have green and blue infrastructure as the foundational framework, with especially a city this small at 2.7 square miles, every space must work efficiently and serve multiple purposes. So our city has to meet multiple goals at once, from sustainability to legislative requirements like vehicle miles, transportation miles. We've got to meet all those legislative requirements and create a livable city that covers the needs of people and the goals that they have efficiently. Next slide, please. So the benefits to Sonoma, I mean, we know what they are. And basically, it embraces the things that we already love about Sonoma. So when we started this, we looked at some of the past plans, the previous general plans that were made, and the visions of those plans are just right on, I mean, they hit the nail on the head. So not just the last general plan, but the previous one that had just a big Love Sonoma on the cover. And so people worked really hard to protect the cultural history of Sonoma, the view sheds of Sonoma, and over time, those things can become at risk, not because we don't know what we're doing. We absolutely do. That's the whole point, is this community embraces everything about our history and our legacy, but because of the external pressures from new legislative mandates or climate change or new global pressures. And so the key benefit is trying to figure out how you embody one vision, one city, and deal with those in an efficient way. And that is what green and blue infrastructure is. It's a planning framework. Next slide, please. And truthfully, what's happening is the Office of Planning and Research from the state of California is directing us to do that, to integrate these things. And so we see other jurisdictions heeding those lessons and using tools and developing frameworks and plans in their general plan, and then going further and creating information for how they can use those assets citywide. And so, for example, let me just give you some definitions. A greenway overlay. That's a citywide planning tool that just ensures parks, trails, and green spaces connect seamlessly. And that there's a legal definition actually in the Office of Planning Research that they've set up in California Civil Code that says this is what a greenway overlay is. So California's already done that work for us by defining it. Green streets. These are just roads, gray infrastructure designed with trees, rain gardens, safe pedestrian features that are integrated to improve walkability and climate resilience. So that definition already exists. So that's what some of the, next slide, please. Wait. There we go. Sorry, you didn't have those manuals up there. So those designs already exist and already have guidelines around them. Same thing with green infrastructure, as I was saying, that we kind of know what gray infrastructure is. Green infrastructure is just the projects and implementation that brings those things and weaves them in with our gray infrastructure. So this is both natural environments, but also quasi-natural environments like bioswales that have curb extensions with rain gardens embedded into them. So it's the built environment plus natural features. Next slide. So our city side can't just be waiting to figure out how to respond to legislative requirements. We need to get ahead and be prescient. There's all kinds of requirements that are coming down to cities. They're expensive to try to chase. If we align those requirements, figure out what the requirements are, the things that we need to respond to and report out on, and then at the same time figure out what the benefits are, what the ecosystem functions are, and the benefits are that improve livability for us. So for example, we know that we have housing requirements. Couple that with green space, couple that with requirements for greenhouse gas reduction in one unified planning element, and at the same time you're meeting your requirements for the state of California, you're creating livable space for people, you're reducing vehicle miles traveled. You've layered all this with one policy now, and you've met multiple needs that serve the state of California, serve legislative requirements, reduce the cost of infrastructure, capital improvement programs, and it's a long-term benefit that this community already has said that they love through time. That's the idea of green and blue infrastructure. Next slide, please. So, woohoo, success. Last night, the Active Transportation Plan gave us an example of some of the things that they've integrated in their county plan for Sonoma. One of the things that they identified in connectivity and mobility was integration of green and blue infrastructure and wanting to see more trees and cool canopies, tree-covered pathways, to help reduce heat island effect in Sonoma. And that was from the community giving feedback saying the heat island effect is intense and it reduces our desire to walk along streets and trails, and it's causing people to be in their cars more when they would otherwise use bicycles or walk. They heard that from the community, from community input, and said, okay, that's a really important feature. Let's put that in the plan for active transportation. And we hear that. So that is a success for Sonoma. So, next slide. So now that we've established a little bit about understanding what green and blue infrastructure is, that it's a planning tool that integrates green assets in the foundation of our city, what I want to do is turn this over and identify these are the 5 goals that we have for the green and blue infrastructure, and introduce 5 different speakers to expand on each of those goals. So I'm going to take the first one, but then we have 4 other speakers to address each of those goals. The first goal, please, next slide, is the establishment of a greenway overlay. And so I'm going to start by walking you through what a greenway overlay is. Now, a greenway overlay is simply just a defined a geographical boundary of where you think green and blue infrastructure can occur. You do this within a regional context. And so the first thing I want to do is show you the picture on the left is what Sonoma Ag and Open Space has identified as critical corridors that they want to invest money into for conservation, open space, and blue line protection. Part of the reason why they've said this is because of their $600 million investment in the Baylands. And so Sonoma Creek is a priority 1 conservation area for them. We're also really concerned about connectivity and wildlife conservation. And so that means anything that's underneath those green corridors is up for investment. They want to put money into acquisition, conservation. But this is a long-term plan. This doesn't mean that this is something that you're committed to. This just is an intention. It's an aspiration. And so willing property owners, when it comes up, when it's available, if they want to participate, they can. It's sort of like the Ridgeline Trail or the Baylands Trail. That was an intention that was set in place over 75 years ago. No one's obliged to do anything. It's just that when something comes up or when money becomes available, because there's a plan in place, people now know, oh, I can play when I want to. That's what we're asking Sonoma to do, is put a plan in place so that people know, Sonoma wants to play. If there's money available, if there's grants available, we know where to direct that to. We need to have a plan that's put in place that has something available for people who, when they want to participate, they can. And so the map that's on the right shows that. What it shows is that you build off of your existing assets. So those big green blobs are the core nodes. That's our existing green infrastructure. The very first thing you must do is do an audit and identify what are the key elements that you're building from, which are existing trails. We need to know what we have. And we don't have a map right now that identifies everything that exists in our city where you can walk, that are green assets, and connecting up all our parks and open space. And then from there, you figure out what the desired paths are or where the gaps are, especially where people are trying to get to and from. And so there's kind of a light blue diagram. So that's from interviewing people, from interviewing the tourist agency, from looking at elder care homes, from walking paths, from seeing where the gaps are, and from the active transportation plan, and figuring out what's the most efficient pathway. The least cost method is what it's called. And then figuring out what the inner pathways are that would connect all the neighborhoods and communities together. Where would people most efficiently be able to, how do you maximize, what's the most bang for buck, basically? And that's what that pathway helps us do. And I can answer more questions and details about it, but I want to be able to introduce and let everybody else get up here as well to talk. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and let the green and blue infrastructure goal number 2 come up. And that would be John Donnelly talking about connectivity, mobility, and trails and parks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. John Donnelly, Chair of the Pros Commission. I salute you for another long evening meeting. At this point, I always think of Oscar Wilde, who said the trouble with socialism is it takes too many evenings. So here we are, even though it's not socialism yet, right? Just local democracy. So I'm asked to speak to goal 2 on connectivity and mobility. The Greenway overlay and general plan would facilitate, and as in our handout, a greenway connectivity and mobility under goal 2 would establish a cohesive network of green streets, trails, multimodal corridors, and seamlessly connect neighborhoods to key infrastructure. So I want to speak here and highlight why and how I think incorporating a greenway overlay in the city's general plan would especially be beneficial to the purpose and duties of the PROS Commission, Parks, Recreation, and Open Space. This is defined in the city code, as you well know, but I'll highlight especially these responsibilities and purposes of the PROS Commission in advising the council. We're supposed to advise on the restoration of important habitat areas within the city. Secondly, we're to highlight proposed improvements or modifications to existing street thoroughfares, including but not limited to sidewalks, areas, city parks, cemeteries, trails, bikeways, and related facilities. Thirdly, we're asked to comment or advise on policies and programs related to tree preservation and expanding the tree planting opportunities in the city, including but not limited to the public right-of-way. And finally, the functions of the tree committee. The PROS Commission is a city tree committee at this point. Also, so I think it's pretty clear that in even thinking about corridors and trails and routes, that a greenway overlay would be a very helpful framework within which we would be able to better advise on this. But also there's some important additional areas in our city that would clearly benefit if we have this in the general plan. One would be that we've been waiting to complete the council would like to have a plaza master plan that's been in the works for some years. And also following the Community Parks and Recreation Task Force that hired the Prochero consulting firm to look at 9 cities on their parks and recreation programs, they advised that the city move forward to develop a parks and recreation master plan. And that has been in abeyance. But clearly, if we had a greenway overlay in the general plan, looking at how to actually fit a master plan for the plaza and its connections with other parks and new parks possibilities would be really very helpful. We've also been working with the Climate Action Commission and the Planning Commission, as you know, on a joint study session to look at the city's tree policies. And we're trying to look at completion of a city urban forest canopy management plan for the city. And already the city has just issued a request for proposal for a consulting firm to do a tree canopy inventory study of the city. And once we get that, again, with the greenway overlay in place in the general plan, we'd be much better able to go to the next step and develop a tree management plan for the city, where to plant trees best in cool corridors, et cetera. And then Cedric just mentioned the county's recommendation for our active transportation plan also included a reference to the need to have this kind of element in our general plan. Finally, a green and blue infrastructure framework would be helpful to ensure the city departments and staff, along with the city commissions, work together towards shared coordinated goals with clear tools and metrics to track projects. City staff workloads could be mitigated by reducing overlaps and prioritizing investments and workloads. And finally, I think just last night, President Biden in his farewell address said that the one word that comes to his mind when thinking how to define the United States of America is possibilities. And so I think we have an opportunity here with the green and blue infrastructure. The Greenways overlay framework is truly a great possibility for us here in the city of Sonoma. And I think I certainly feel, I think we all owe Cedra Nathan a huge thanks for bringing this possibility forward to our consideration. She has truly gifted our city and our community with not only her vision of the Greenway overlay framework for Sonoma, but also with all the time and energy and public engagement she has devoted to elaborating the many benefits of the proposed plan. That's what we're seeing with her presentation tonight. Now it is up to us, the City Council, the City Manager, and City staff, along with our City Commissions and public engagement, to see that this Greenway overlay possibility really comes to life in our city. It is promising to me to note that during the Council's October 14th special meeting on the general plan, all the Council members commented at the end of the presentation that they thought this was an aspirational goal that should be included in the general plan, an aspirational possibility that we'd like to see included. And in this week's Sonoma Sun magazine, Mayor Ferrar Rivas had an interview on what she hopes to see going forward, and she cited that she'd like to see the inclusion of a green and blue overlay in the general plan. I think the council goal-setting session for at the end of this month, January 30th, will see a further reinforcement of the desire to have our city move forward with this. So thank you for your consideration, and if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer any.
Thank you. We'll offer those at the end.
Okay.
Slide 3. Hi, my name is Lauren Kirshner, and I'm on the city's Cultural and Fine Arts Commission. So I'd like you to imagine walking through Sonoma, where every pathway tells a story through the thoughtful integration of art and green spaces. This green and blue infrastructure framework isn't just about environmental sustainability. It's fundamentally about creating spaces that enhance a community's well-being and quality of life. Our plan for connected greenways will create visually and physically linked venues throughout our community. These spaces can be enhanced with public art and historical details, creating pathways that not only connect our neighborhood physically, but strengthen our social bonds and community identity. Now let me highlight 3 exciting developments in motion with the Cultural and Fine Arts Commission. First, in December, our City Council approved a modernized public art policy, replacing an outdated 20-year guideline. Next, we are launching work on a public art master plan this year, which the city doesn't have currently at all, including a toolbox with a public art map to identify prime locations for installations. And finally, we're awaiting results on a citywide fee study for new percentage for the arts framework to expand our program's capacity. So needless to say, the arts are very important to Sonoma. This Green and Blue initiative supports community development by creating spaces where people naturally gather, connect, and engage with both art and nature. When we combine art with our green spaces, we're nurturing spaces that promote social interaction, cultural expression, community pride, things that all of us are very important to all of us. And last but not least, this comprehensive approach drives economic growth in our tourism-based economy by attracting visitors, businesses, and talent, making Sonoma a destination that can compete with some of the more progressive, attractive places to both visit and live. So thank you for your time and your service. Good night.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. Oh, there it is. There it is. There you go. David Morrell. I know many of you. I chair the Climate Action Commission, and I think you won't be surprised to hear that the green-blue infrastructure that we're proposing for full integration into our new and evolving general plan is highly consistent with our actions on climate here in Sonoma. We all are facing a climate emergency. The Sonoma fires of recent years made that fairly clear. Those of us like myself that have family in Los Angeles make it even more clear at the moment how critical this all is. The City Council has approved a target of climate-neutral greenhouse gas emissions associated with the city of Sonoma by 2030. Time is ticking. To do so, the Climate Action Commission has prepared an overall climate action plan. It's been approved by the City Council for ongoing implementation. It's not perfect, but it's an important step forward as we grapple with the challenge of dealing with a global issue from the perspective of Little Sonoma, as we all take the right actions every day to make a difference. Many of our climate action plan's key elements are being reflected in the new version of the general plan as it evolves, as it should be. Adding extensive green infrastructure into our new general plan seems to me to be imperative to making Sonoma a climate-smart city. We want it to be a climate-smart tourist destination from an economic perspective. And we encourage our efforts to plant more new trees. A year ago, the council picked trees as its primary goal for the year as well. We want to retain existing trees and even create some new green pocket forests, sometimes called Miyawaki forests here in Sonoma. We support creating available green walkways and bikeways for both residents and tourists. We're pleased the city is soon to begin an updated comprehensive tree inventory. I understand several proposals are in hand, and we're picking among several possibilities the winner. We're using new online tools to track our trees and interface that presumptively with the evolving green pathways and green infrastructure. We believe that generally both 5th Street West and 5th Street East can become tree-lined corridors of which we can be proud. We support water quality management for Blue Sonoma too. In a related new effort that I'm pleased to share with you this evening, 3 members of the Climate Action Commission are now meeting regularly with 3 representatives from the Sonoma Chamber of Commerce as the environmental community and the business community work together hand in hand to explore together all aspects of making Sonoma a truly climate-smart tourist destination. The members of this come from the city's hotel, restaurant, and wine industries, meeting with 3 of us from the Climate Action Commission on a monthly basis. This unique group from the environment and the business communities are working together. We endorse including appropriate existing and new green business and green efforts in the new general plan. Green spaces encourage tourism while contributing to effective climate action here in Sonoma. In summary, 2025 is clearly becoming a year for effective climate action, including appropriate incorporation of green pathways and the overall GBI concept into the evolving general plan, of which is central to your work at this commission. This Climate Action Commission looks forward to working successfully with you on your commission, with the Parks and Rec Commission that John Donnelly spoke of, with the Arts Commission, and with the City Council and city staff in moving us aggressively into a new era of clearly climate-smart Sonoma. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Planning Commission. I'm Caitlin Cornwall, and I'm speaking for Sonoma Ecology Center tonight, although this topic is pretty consistent with some kind of long ago listening sessions across the Sonoma Valley community that Sonoma Valley Collaborative did, where just connectivity and green spaces came up pretty high on the list, but just not as high as housing. So I'm going to speak tonight as the Ecology Center. This is this integration of green spaces and consideration for water into the city's planning efforts is something that the Ecology Center strongly supports. And I want to speak to a piece of it that is just another example of all the different functions that can stack on top of each other if the city prioritizes this, what Cedra has called the emerald necklace of trails and sites around the city, which is the benefits that such a system would bring to the people of Sonoma and Sonoma Valley, and particularly the less privileged among us. Most of us in this room have easy access to beautiful spaces, maybe our backyard, maybe a nearby trail, but there are a lot of people in our community and near the city of Sonoma for whom a working trail system that really goes from where they live to where they work to where they shop to where their kid goes to school would make a material and economic difference in their life. And so as we all know, getting outdoors is incredible for physical health and mental health. And those benefits, again, are most important for the least advantaged among us. So just want to make a plug for how many returns on investment such a trail system would be for the city of Sonoma. You've heard talk about sort of equity differences between East and West Sonoma, between the city of Sonoma and the Springs, and this greenway overlay would go a long way to address those issues, sort of perceived and real. One of the issues, there's a map on this slide about this, is just about deaths, safety. So making traffic calming elements, clear signage, wayfinding on the places where people need to travel outside of cars will increase safety and reduce deaths. And also, actually, the cooling effect of trees, of course, is a major issue. I don't know if you all know this, but the climate impact that actually kills the most people worldwide is heat. and we're getting warmer. We need more trees. So I think that's all I'll say about this slide, this last goal of the green-blue infrastructure, but I've been asked to bring this presentation home, so let's go on to the next slide. Now that's right. Just in case all of this talk sounds kind of abstract, these are just examples of really tangible pieces, components of green-blue infrastructure. All of these are, you know, known entities. Cities all over the place do these all the time. And the Greenway Overlay just creates a unifying, holistic system in which they can all be integrated with each other and planned at the same time. And there are really specific standards for implementing all of these things, and actually many funding sources for getting them paid for also. So let's go on to the next slide. And I think this is the last one. Yeah, what is needed to actually realize green-blue infrastructure as a foundation of Sonoma's general plan? It's a commitment by you and the City Council that this is a good unifying concept that checks a whole lot of boxes. There are a lot of different ways actually that this could be integrated into the general plan, and we, the promoters of green-blue infrastructure, are not trying to dictate any particular way. Should it be a standalone element? Should it be an overlay that lives in some other existing element? That's not something we're trying to push on really hard, but just that you and others, decision makers at the city, commit to this fundamental unifying approach. We also, second bullet there, really think it behooves the city to take advantage of and leverage the amount of the sort of groundswell for support for this idea across the community. And one example is the amazing work that Cedra has done, the specificity and detail of the mapping that she has done, the number of constituents that she has talked to. That is work you cannot get done at that level by any consultant. It's really amazing, and it should go into detailed plans and maps in the general plan. And of course, any adoption of this will require some policy changes, but I want to, and we'll need indicators of success, yes, but I guess I want to just end with, this is a kind of approach that many other cities have done. The precedents are all there, and there's just so many benefits. So we urge you to discuss and promote and adopt and get excited about green-blue infrastructure in Sonoma. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for the work that you did, not only on this presentation, but the 68-page document. And again, the level of detail that, you know, you didn't have to go down to the level of goals and implementation, but thank you for doing that. It gives a lot of ideas that may be used. So at this time, I'd like to open up for any of the commissioners to ask any questions, follow-up questions.
No questions, comments?
Before we get to comments, any clarifying questions? I actually do have a question, and I have a question for both the group and staff. So it sounds like, I mean, this is pretty clear what we want, but it sounds like amazing things are already happening. Things are happening with PROS, with the Culture and Arts Commission, the Climate Commission. We just had the adoption of the ATP, which again, I agree, I think they did a great job of taking input and building that connected map, and also putting in reference to these green overlays. I also want to acknowledge that Jennifer, the green overlay concept was supported by the council to put in the general plan, and Jennifer indicated that examples would be circulation element and open space. So my question for the group is, what do you want to happen with regard to the things already happening? Are you confident that things will move forward? Do you need it codified? I'm just curious what else you are looking for in addition to what Caitlin has said.
I'll answer that, but there might be other people who have some other things, and then you know, it has to be like Caitlin was saying, it's a iterative process. So there's a couple of things that need to happen right off the bat. The first thing is we need to put into our land use, we're in the land use phase, what are the assets? The very first thing you need to do is audit and identify. So there are assets that we want to leverage off of and build off of that exist already. So we don't actually have mapped our green infrastructure assets that exist that we should leverage from. So for example, when I was talking to David Ewan the other day, there's a private open space. The way that land use is used, designated open space, residential space, industrial or commercial space, those are functional designations. Whether it's private or public is not in land use designation is not you can identify it as private or public. And so we need to identify both public and private open space in our land use designation so we know what we're linking up. And so right off of Napa Street, south of Napa Street, where it becomes railroad, there's a open space trail there right behind Staples that has public access. That's a really critical, important linkage for people to come into from the Springs or from Maxwell Park into Sonoma and coming into the core of Sonoma to the schools or the hospital or wherever. That's not on any of our maps. It looks like maybe it's private property, I'm not sure, but it's public access. Same thing with the easement that we have public access through between First Street West and 2nd Street West, right across from Whole Foods. There's a public easement there. So in a lot of cities, they will map that. They'll identify where you have public trails that you can get through. So the very first thing we need to do is, what do we have? And then from there, you can identify the missing links. So that's one. Two is we need the greenway overlay, and the easiest way to do that is to just use the California Civil Code. It tracks with what the riparian waterways are, and it sets up like that, kind of like that greenway overlay I showed you that the California Ag and Open Space has. This is modeled on habitat conservation plans, which was actually developed by the development community because they wanted to know where are we playing. So this is a asset to help reduce uncertainty, and it identifies the geographical boundaries, the scope of where we're trying to work. And so there's a code that Jennifer had put up in a presentation at one point that identified what a greenway overlay was, defined it, what the boundaries are. That needs to be put into the general plan so it could define the scope of where projects are. And then the final and third thing is a toolbox, kind of like the arts toolbox that Lauren talked about. And a toolbox of projects that, so if someone wants to participate or play, or if there's policies, someone can say, okay, Safeway, for example, wants to develop their project, and they're willing to give us conservation easement between the backside next to Sasserini and the parking lot. So we say, okay, great, but here are the different things we want you to possibly do, and you can pick from a suite of options. That could be developed. Now, whether that's developed as part of the general plan or not, or we just identify in the general plan that these toolbox of options should be forthcoming, that's the kind of thing you would point to.
Okay, thank you. And so,
And part of the reason, the adaptive management, that's part of the reason that's important is that the toolbox can evolve through time. Part of habitat conservation plans is that they allow people to move through time, because if you make something static, you can evolve through time. And so that's why you want it not in the general plan. The general plan is the aspirational element, but the toolbox allows you to evolve as you get new information or projects come to pass. You don't need to keep referring to something, so that's.
Okay, thank you. And for staff, I'm curious, just on a high level, how would we use the information that's being provided in the general plan? What are things that you could think of in terms of what was presented, not only here but in that larger document or in collaboration with these various commissions and the public?
Sure. There's been a lot of examples that were provided for different policy typologies, goals, implementation measures. And some of them are more specific that you would see in more of as an example that was provided on one of the slides, like a greenway plan. You could do like where you're getting into the minutia detail of design details and things like that. There also would be development code. So the general plan will say, we recommend that you do these things. So in the previous general plan, just to bring up like arts, the previous general plan said we need an arts plan. And then it's been worked on. But that was the only reference to arts. I mean, we definitely plan on putting more of the arts. We don't even have a section on our historic resources at all. There's nothing about cultural resources in our general plan. So we'll be adding more about that. As far as the land use that we're doing right now is the greenway overlay itself will be an overlay just like our creek overlay. And it's identification where the creeks are actually exposed. And we would add a policy and a goal of implementing that Greenway Civil Code. Civil Code actually identifies a quarter-mile boundary from the edge of the property line of that waterway. So that's a good portion of our city. So we're not going to map that because that's a lot of map on a land use map, right? So we're going to just call it out like we do the creek. We don't actually map our creek overlay, we call it out and describe it. It's actually not in our general plan, so we're adding it to the general plan. So that's just an example of that. As far as the parks go, we do have obviously we have a land use layer of parks. It's the green. Up there. I was gonna bring it up here too. So we have public parks, right? And we know that there are other private parks, but we don't know them all quite yet. We're working on it. So these are all the public ones that have already been identified. We've identified them through land use. We might have gotten an easement on those parks in the past. We know that there's conservation areas as well throughout our city. And so the intent in our conservation and open space element will be to obviously map all those parks. And then the idea and the concept around tying them together is kind of a combination of parks, open space, especially with the greenway concept, and the linkages. And then that's also part of what, we adopted last night with the active transportation plan, but I see that there's opportunities for further refinement in our active transportation plan as well as their general plan for really identifying those specific connections. That ATP is more of an aspirational, where do we want bikes and where do we want the sidewalks, not necessarily focused on connecting and linkages between our schools and other heavily used places. So that would be part of those elements and would be mapped with that. If we went in and mapped, just for example, this, I'll zoom in now that I realize that's how small that is.
I just have to add something here because this is so exciting, I think. That whole west side there, except for one parcel, is essentially a green belt. I mean, we almost have it completely done, you guys. I mean, it's very, very exciting because I've had to hand draw in these maps. So I used to do this for the Nature Conservancy when I worked, I mentioned I used to also work for the Nature Conservancy on conservation easement acquisitions and partnerships with businesses. So that entire west side, except for one parcel south of Napa Street, is in green space. And so we have that urban growth boundary that I know Larry worked on that 80% of this population voted for. But it's not even on your map that you actually have more than that. You almost have the entire west side within the city boundary in green space, some of which is open for public access. But the other part of it is in HOA ownership park open space. And I mean, when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, you guys don't even have that much to do. It's almost done. And so seeing that just blew, I mean, it's amazing. But you don't have it on a map. You don't know it. I even told Larry about it, and he didn't realize that. And how long have you lived here, Larry? 35 years. Okay, sorry.
It's okay. So some of it is looking up what the actual aspects are, right, along those. Some of these are easements for private, right, for the development itself, and they're not open to the public. There's liability and other issues around that. So goal, yes. And, you know, we have talked about this is really the only link left that hasn't already been identified. But with that comes, all right, then we need to look at easements and things like that. So that's where the general plan can kind of set that higher level goal. You know, Chair Donnelly talked about, you know, Parks Master Plan. You know, those are the next level plans where we get to that level of detail where we're really focused on the plans themselves as far as the parks, you know, are they going to be programmed? Are they more about nature and open space? Trails? Like how are we using them more specifically? So we give the context and then we give the specifics. I explained this to somebody else the other day too. I said, so everywhere you see yellow on this map in the general plan says the same thing, but when I look at my development code, it tells me something different depending on where I'm at. And so that's the kind of the idea. The general plan gives me the high level, and then my next level is going to give me more of that specific on the ground aspect. But the general plan sets those policies in that direction to create those. So hope that makes sense. Answers the question.
Thank you. Matt?
Well, first a question for staff, and then can I make some comments? So Jennifer, can you clarify for me how what we're talking about tonight fits into our consultant's general plan process and scope of work?
So this will be part of the actual written section of the different elements.
Okay, so we're not too late, is
No.
is my point. We're just at the right time.
So right now we're finishing what that map looks like specifically, because that's kind of impacts physical aspects, and so we need to do the EIR based on that. And then we are going to get some results from that. But during that process, while we're going through all the studies and everything with the EIR, is when we're writing and then bringing forward draft of the documents.
Okay, and so when and how does material or a concept like this come to the attention of the consultant and get integrated into his thinking about what we want to do?
So I've already shared the information that we had received previously on this, and so I'll share this as well, and I'm the first person that reads them, so.
Okay, so he's cool with it so far?
Oh yeah, these are all.
I mean, he'll do whatever
this
we want him to do, right?
Yeah, and this is current practice. A lot of these topics and things are current.
Great.
And we've already built it into even our climate action strategies has some of these things. So.
Okay. Well, let me make just a couple of comments. I know it's getting late. Those of you who know me and have listened to me over the years know that I've talked a lot about living systems, and what's exciting for me about this is that this GBI infrastructure concept essentially reflects the dynamic of a living system. We are, as a city, a single organism, and you can look at the elements of us as an organism and see how they work together as a living system in an analogy with even a human living system. In other words, we've got a circulatory system, which would be the riparian corridors and the wildlife corridors, and the whole fluid flow of the community. We've got the respiratory system, which is basically the green portion of the GBI. It's the paths and the parks and the recreational opportunities and the trees, and the agricultural open space. We've got the energy system of the living system, which is essentially the economy or the money that flows through here and provides the energy this community needs to grow and to flourish. We've got a nervous system of the living experience of being here, this sense of place that we all feel and walk through and experience as part of the living system every day. And then we've got the structural, the bones of the body, the streets and the hardscape and the buildings and the businesses and the public spaces, the built world. These are also part of the living system, just like the bones of the body are. And so what excites me about this is that we're beginning to naturally think in terms of a living environment, a living city, where all the parts work together. And as Cedra noted earlier, getting away from the notion of taking these pieces and dealing with them in isolation as if they're separate pieces that can be isolated from the whole. We are a whole, and to the extent to which we've become fragmented in our thinking, that's all it is. I mean, even if our thinking gets fragmented, the whole remains. And so getting back in touch with the reality of this living system and how it works, a cultural living system of humanity on the earth, is to me a very exciting thing. I think I was thinking back when John was speaking about the beginnings of the Environmental Advisory Commission, as it was called when it was first put together. And this was in an earlier era. I mean, we're talking the 90s, and we'd all seen the picture of the blue planet hanging in the blackness of space, and Earth consciousness was on all our minds, at least the minds of my generation, and the customary process, interestingly enough, was that the mission of the Environmental Commission in its beginnings was that all of the development projects that came forward were reviewed by the Environmental Advisory Commission. Just like the Planning Commission reviews all projects, the Environmental Advisory Commission was reviewing the projects. I think we lost touch with that mission, and the commission got fragmented and cut out of this living system, and ceased to be an evaluative arm of looking at development in the city. But now I can see that this provides an opportunity with a framework like this to make the environment once again central as a touchstone for the decisions that we're making. So my view is that the opportunity is that this general plan, if we put it together correctly, will have the climate and the GBI as a touchstone for making decisions. In other words, as we consider a project, or we consider an initiative, we consider an economic development, we consider a housing program or a proposal, that it not go forward without a discussion about its connection to the whole living system. And I think that's a fabulous thing to return to. I'm sorry that we lost it over the years. I'm not really sure. It just happened slowly over time. It was this kind of mission drift. And originally, I can't remember, it had a dual role, and one role came up more than the other. But I think this is bringing us back to our core values that at least were very important to me. And so I'm very excited by this. And I want to thank you all for all the work you've been putting into it. It certainly fits into the way I think of how Sonoma has to move into the future, and in a healthier way, in concert with the living system of the earth, not in competition or as an adversary of it. And I think it's the key to the survival of the human species, as well as many of the other species that we share this planet with. We can't continue to think in this fragmented way that we have. So thank you, and I'm very pleased and excited to be participating in this.
Thank you. Any other commissioner comment? Commissioner Willers?
First, I want to say thank you to everyone that put this presentation together and has been doing the hard work. Cedra, exclamation mark. And I want to use Larry's, or I want to follow up with Larry's metaphor and living organism, and that is, I like the way that you used the building fabric as the bones or the structure of the city, but without any other element of the living organism, you're just a bag of bones. And that's how you end up when all else fails. You end up as a bag of bones. And it's the last part that's left. And so in order for that bag of bones to get held together, and it's a metaphor that I've always used in terms of development, and that is the most important, I believe, the most important element of our community, and it is the one that people take away with them and remember the longest, are not the bones. It's not the structure. It's all of that space in between that structures our interaction with those elements. And so, you think of the favorite neighborhoods, you think of the neighborhoods that people associate with Sonoma, and those are the ones that are kind of the neighborhoods that are this idea. And unfortunately, the way in which development patterns happened over time in relationship to is that those elements that were environmental, trees in a traditional neighborhood were environmental before you had air conditioning, because they help cool your house. They help cool your neighborhood. And you couldn't rely on air conditioning to do it because you didn't have it. When we could all live in glass boxes and fill it with cool air and didn't need trees to do it, then we ended up with that as our only means of housing ourselves. So I even think of that in the context of the California Quality Act, of CEQA, Environmental Quality Act, and that unfortunately the aspirations of the California Environmental Quality Act were very well founded, but the minutia of the law and the way in which the law is implemented as a box-checking, mitigating thing has lost the life in terms of what it was aspiring for. And so if we can introduce into our general plan an overriding aspiration that connects all of these elements, that in many ways is the foundation of CEQA, we can hopefully even preempt the need to mitigate. And so, this would be fantastic. Anyway.
Thank you. Any other comments? Commissioner Nugent.
Well, I echo the how exciting this is, and it's just, and I so appreciate all of the work that has gone into it. I appreciate the comprehensiveness of the report, and the level of detail that you've made it constructive, that we can actually, I can actually envision it and see this. And it just is extremely exciting, and I look forward to, being a part of implementing this. And I'm super excited because I have a date with Cedra next week, and we're gonna take a walk, and I'm super excited to be around. Just anyway, can't wait.
Vice Chair WIRICK.
John, David, Lauren, Caitlin, especially Cedra, thank you guys so much for what you do, for the role you play. Thank you for your heart on this important issue and for your contributions and ensuring that our community is responsibly planned going forward. each of you in your parts of this presentation resonated with me, and admittedly on a subject matter that I don't know a whole lot about. And I applaud you. I commend you. In this role, I feel like sometimes I can only barely do what's minimally required of me, let alone showing up at another commission's meeting to help to inform and to spread awareness and your vast knowledge. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Isabel, would you like to make any comment about resonates with you? Any comment?
I would just like to echo my thanks. This is really remarkable work, and it's so impressive, and I love the overarching plan to make our community more connected by the green and blue spaces. So thank you very much.
And I'll keep it short, and I'll end by saying, firstly, I want to thank Commissioner Barnett and Jennifer Gates and Cedra for bringing this together, because it's unusual for us to have this kind of a invitation and presentation, but we all thought it was very important because it is an important topic. Secondly, I think the value here tonight also, not only educationally, but it was to start to crystallize these ideas and get them in a public forum. Now it's on video. I encourage you to share this material with the council members so you don't have to redo it. And finally, I'm excited about this too, because what we're doing here is codifying what we love about this community. And I think doing that in the general plan and having great implementation ideas is will really not make it an organic thing, but make it an actual thing. And I'm really excited to see all the work that's already going on. And, again, get that folded in to make sure we don't lose any of that. So thank you again, and appreciate you for staying so late, and the staff too, because I know it's many late evenings. So thank you so much. Yeah. All right. Now we will definitely get out of here before the drop dead, I hope, but we'll move on to item 7, which is director comments and announcements.
So my main comment is that obviously we all know the city council goal setting is January 30th, and then you get to join me if you want to for the general plan land use community meeting. You know you do. So you can be with me literally all day. So
We would love to.
And so that's the main thing that's coming up. And then we have our next commission meeting in February. And we'll see what that looks like. So depending on what the goal setting meeting, my intent is to bring forward to you their overall ideas, but they will not have actually ratified them at a city council meeting at that point. But I figure we can go ahead and start looking at our work plan and how we've already identified some things, and then kind of prioritize those work plan items for this year. I will say housing element is really our Diane's focus. It's going to be a lot of the ordinances around density bonus and ADU, and because of all the law changes that we need to get compliant with. We sat in on a meeting today where HCD basically warned us that they will be reviewing the what we call Table D of our annual progress report, and they are expecting a lot of really specific information now, and they will be utilizing that information to determine compliance with the housing element. Yay. So we are working and focusing on that as well for the next 3 weeks of trying to fill out all of the tables that they require to be filled out. And we will bring that to you as well It may end up having to be after we go to city council, because that is actually what is required before we can submit to APR. And we have to submit to APR by April 1st. We have to submit that APR to HCD. Annual progress report. So we have to actually do an annual progress report for the housing element as well as the general plan as a whole every year by April 1st. And so that's our focus right now for the next few weeks, is to get that going and get that completed in time for a March hearing. Planning commissioner training. So I signed up 3 people so far. So they do offer 1 days, and they have all 3 days. It is in Santa Rosa, so it's really close. And you will get your ethics training compliance done, so you don't have to do it online. I think that's
What's
better.
the date of that?
March 5th through the 7th. So March 5th in the morning is the actual ethics. So if you just can go 1 day, you might want to do that day, and then that way you don't have to watch a webinar on ethics. So, so let me know, and I'll get you registered. But the 3 that I have talked to have already should have an email.
Go ahead and put me on the list.
For all 3 days?
Yeah.
Okay.
Jennifer, and I just want to make sure I'm on the list because I sent you something a while ago.
You should have already received it.
I'll look. I don't remember. Am I
Okay.
receiving it from you?
No, you would have received it from Cal Cities.
I'll go back and check.
Okay.
You know.
When I went to go, because I thought I forgot that I had, and I would type in your name, it said already registered. So
Are they going to have a Scott Wiener dunking booth at that training?
you know,
Madam Chair, I think you have to censure.
Yeah.
Order.
He is not the keynote speaker.
Okay.
All right, so I think those are my main things, and so I know we've already talked. So Sheila, if you can let me know, and then I think that's it, unless anybody has any.
Is our next meeting date the 3rd Thursday in
Yes.
February?
Yes. So the calendar, we'll get you the calendar, but the only dates for this commission that were changed was August or September. I can't remember, but I'll double check. Everything else, we're staying the same. We lucked out. All right.
What about commissioner appointments?
I'm pushing as much as I can. I think they listed Barbos's, but I'm not positive.
I think my term is up, and I'm wondering if I have to reapply. Like, I haven't heard anything.
Yeah. So I need to follow up with Rebecca on that. My Design Review Commission had the same question. My understanding with all the changes that they made is that unless the council decides to remove an individual, if you're at large, then they need to do that as a body and put somebody there. It didn't sound like they were going to reopen it every year, but I'll double check. So, and then Barbara's position, and then I have another opening position on design review too. Okay.
Okay, well, we'll move on to item 8, which is commissioner reports and comments.
If you don't want to attend the planning commissioner training, you can come to Reno with me for a conference on cattle rustling and horse theft, if that interests anyone. It's at the Silver Legacy. It's beautiful accommodations.
Is cow tipping a crime in this state?
It depends. Is the cow offended?
I have a comment question. Jennifer, with regard to the city council goals, I'm wondering when is the best time for us to review our 2024 planning commission goals? You want to do that like when you bring up the new 2025 commission goals?
Right. So I was going to say that I'll bring the 2024 list when I bring what the goals were, and so we can prioritize, add, remove. So we can look at that again. We won't do the whole big thing that we did to create the initial list because we already have a good list and we have some state laws that we need to comply with. So we have some priorities already in that sense. But I think based on our conversations, we really have some smaller things that we want to get done sooner, like night sky. And so I think that's the part of that conversation that we need to have.
Okay, but you will include the things that have already been completed. Okay, cool. All right, good.
Right.
Okay.
And then the housing element as well. I'm sure everybody's read that long list by now.
I don't know if we should put this off. Item 9, adjournment. Do I have a motion?
Move to adjourn.
Adjourn. Thanks, everybody.